Gilfa's Eldragon was a 10-star martial art warrior, a name that had once shaken the entire continent. After a fierce, earth-shattering battle, he finally slew the divine dragon. Its colossal body collapsed, and silence fell upon the battlefield. At last, the era-defining war had ended. With trembling hands, Gilfas took the golden fruit. He knew the legends well. The fruit granted immortality, and with it the chance to reach the absolute peak of martial arts, a realm no human had ever truly touched. Without hesitation, he consumed it. Golden aura burst forth from his back, surging like a blazing sun. The power wrapped around his body, flooding his veins, carving itself into his bones. Decades passed. Gilfas grew old. His body weakened, his breath slowed, and now he lay surrounded by his family. His son stood closest, his face twisted in grief. Gilfas glanced at him and spoke calmly, almost gently, telling him not to make such a pathetic expression. He reminded them all that he had lived a long life, one filled with glory, battle, and honor. Yet, as death approached, he felt it. Regret. If only he had more time. If only he could take one more step toward the peak of martial arts. His eyes slowly closed. Gilfas suddenly felt something was wrong. He opened his eyes and stared at an unfamiliar ceiling. Confused, he tried to move, only to see a tiny hand rise into his vision. Shock coursed through him. He was in a baby's body. For a brief moment his mind reeled. Even as a former 10-star warrior, he had failed to notice when or how this had happened. He forced himself to calm down. Someone had done this. Then it struck him. The golden fruit. It was never meant to grant immortality. It was meant for reincarnation. A slow, eerie smile formed on his infant face. With a second life, unlimited time lay before him. This time he would truly reach the peak of martial arts. However, confusion returned when he noticed the surroundings. Cradles. Dozens of them. Babies lay around him. He wondered if he had been reborn once more into the Eldragon family. Before he could think further, the door opened. Several maids entered, carrying trays filled with feeding bottles and jars containing a strange, ominous liquid. One maid lifted a goblin infant by the neck and poured the liquid into its mouth. Gilfas watched in shock. The goblin child's body suddenly glowed, then exploded, blood splattering across the room. Gilfas froze. The maid merely muttered that this amount should be fine if diluted. Then she turned toward him. Before he could react, she grabbed him and began feeding him the same liquid. Gilfas instantly recognized it. Ancient dragon blood. His mind shook. Why were they feeding this to babies? His instincts screamed at him to resist, but his infant body betrayed him. He swallowed a small amount despite struggling. Around him, other babies spat the liquid out, crying in pain. Then a realization struck him. If he could fully absorb this power, he might surpass his past self. He stopped resisting. Instead, he devoured the liquid calmly, drawing in every trace of its terrifying magical energy. The maids stared at him in disbelief, but this outcome was favorable for them. When the bottle emptied, she gently placed him back into his cradle. Golden aura flickered from neighboring cradles as well. Gilfas understood. Other babies had survived too. Exhausted from the overwhelming surge of power, his consciousness faded, and the patriarch fell asleep. 7 years had passed since his rebirth. Now Gilfas, now known as Zeke Eldragon, balanced his weight on a single hand. A massive rock rested atop his feet as he performed one-handed push-ups without the slightest tremor. With a sharp breath, Zeke kicked his legs upward. The rock flew into the air. He twisted mid-motion, landed lightly on the ground, and let the stone crash behind him. A satisfied smile crossed his face. This body was magnificent, all thanks to the ancient dragon's blood. That power, the true source, existed within all living beings. The blood Zeke and the other infants had consumed contained a fragment of that primordial essence. Those who ingested even a small amount developed bodies far superior to normal humans. But Zeke was different. In his past life, he had absorbed the divine dragon's true source. This time he had taken in every drop of the ancient dragon's blood without rejection. The transformation he underwent surpassed even his own expectations. Yet something didn't make sense. He was still only a 1-star warrior. That fact bothered him deeply. In his past life, at this age, he would have already reached 4 stars. A star was the compression of one's true source power to its absolute limit. Cultivators envisioned their body as a universe, allowing a star to form and float within it. Each additional star increased both strength and difficulty exponentially. More stars meant greater power, and in his previous life, as Gilfas Eldragon, Zeke had reached an unprecedented realm, 10 stars, the only being in history to ever do so. Yet now, despite his overwhelming physical strength, he remained stuck at 1 star. Zeke frowned slightly. 7 years had passed since he had been reborn as an illegitimate child of the head of Eldragon family. His mother had died early. His father, head of the family, had never once appeared. Zeke couldn't help but wonder what kind of parent that was. And to think that after 1,000 years, he had reincarnated into the same Eldragon family. The world itself had changed. It had become a place where the strong devoured the weak. The clearest proof of that was a brutal ritual known as the Dragon's Trial. Only infants who survived it were meant to be trained as true Eldragon warriors. Yet Zeke was not among them. Instead, he had been sent to the countryside, attended only by maids. 7 years. Not a single instructor. Zeke confronted her directly, asking whether he had failed the Dragon's Trial, and was therefore denied training. The maid replied calmly that if he required anything, he should simply say so. Zeke answered that he could handle himself, but what he truly needed was combat training. He asked about the other children of the main family. Again, the same answer. Nothing changed. His expression darkened as he pressed further, but the maid remained unmoved. Eventually, she explained that she had only been ordered to tend to his personal needs. Zeke studied her carefully. She was a 3-star fighter. For basic training, she would have been more than sufficient. Exhausted, Zeke turned away and announced that he was heading into the forest. Living for 7 years with nothing but the bare minimum of interaction was unnatural. Still, the maids did not stop him. In the forest, Zeke consumed poisonous herbs without hesitation. They tasted vile, but this too was part of his training. He sensed something. Roots slithered beneath the soil, brushing against his feet. Zeke muttered in irritation, wondering why they wouldn't stop following him. He sighed and remarked aloud that if anyone had something to say, they should just show themselves instead of hiding. No response came. As he moved deeper, the air changed. A strange black mist lingered among the trees. Zeke frowned. This hadn't existed 1,000 years ago. From the bushes, an anger boar burst forth, its eyes bloodshot as it charged at him. Zeke shifted his body sideways with effortless precision. The boar missed. Channeling energy into his fist, Zeke struck once, clean and controlled, into the beast's abdomen. The boar collapsed instantly. Zeke blinked, then smiled faintly. That had only been a light tap. Even at 1 star, the power was overwhelming. He hoisted the boar onto his shoulder, reflecting that the quality of a star mattered far more than its number. Still, he was tired of being alone. Perhaps it was time to leave. As Zeke walked away, unaware, a man hidden behind a tree stared in shock. Zeke hadn't even formed a 2nd star, yet he had killed an anger boar in a single blow without training, and worse, he had sensed the Watcher's presence. The man narrowed his eyes. Zeke's mother had died young. His father had shown no interest. There was no way the boy had received proper education. And yet, as the illegitimate child of the family head, Zeke was not allowed to escape. He had been under surveillance all along. The man smiled slowly. Even if he carried the blood of the family head, things were starting to get interesting. Back at the estate, Zeke returned to sense several unfamiliar figures standing inside. Each of them radiated a powerful aura that immediately caught his attention. Curious but cautious, he moved closer and listened from outside the doorway. They were not hostile, yet the authority surrounding them was unmistakable. Zeke pushed the door open and demanded to know why they had come. The men turned toward him at once. All of them wore formal attire bearing the Eldragon crest. Stepping forward together, they stated that they had arrived to escort young Master Zeke for an examination. Zeke frowned, questioning what kind of examination it was. Before any protest could continue, they escorted him toward the main Eldragon estate. For the first time in 7 years, Zeke stepped into a world he had only heard described in passing. He was dressed in a formal uniform and led into a massive academy filled with children from the Eldragon family. Only then did he learn the truth. This place was the Dragon's Nest Academy, an institution established by the Eldragon clan itself. Every child born into the family was required to attend upon reaching the age of 7. That day marked the entrance examination. The issue was simple. Zeke had never received any education, training, or preparation. Refusal, however, was not an option. The examination was mandatory, an unbreakable family tradition. As he passed through the academy gates, irritation settled within him. While other children chatted and laughed excitedly, Zeke walked alone, lowering his head to ease the growing pressure behind his eyes. At that moment, a boy with bright blue hair approached him cautiously. The boy expressed concern over Zeke's condition and remarked that he looked unwell. Zeke turned toward him coldly and questioned what the boy wanted. The boy flinched slightly, but answered with sincerity. His name was Langus. He explained that he had only approached because Zeke appeared troubled. Zeke paused. There was something timid yet genuine about Langus. A faint but stable energy radiated from him. Relaxing slightly, Zeke apologized for his earlier attitude and introduced himself. He explained that he was confused about the situation and asked if Langus knew what kind of test the examination involved. Langus smiled awkwardly and replied that the entrance exam rarely changed. Zeke pressed further, asking what the test actually consisted of. Langus blinked in disbelief, realizing that Zeke truly knew nothing about the exam. He asked how Zeke could be unaware of something so basic. Zeke simply confirmed that he had no prior knowledge. Langus sighed and began to explain, but before he could finish, loud laughter echoed through the corridor. A group of boys approached, their expressions filled with mockery. One of them loudly pointed out Langus, calling him the runt from Oldscale Village. The group was led by Retin, another child from Oldscale Village. Retin mocked Langus, questioning why someone like him would even bother attending the entrance examination instead of returning home. Langus replied calmly that he had come to take the test. That response enraged Retin. He shouted that Langus was worthless and claimed that someone like him could never enter the academy. His laughter grew cruel as he reminded Langus that his father had been branded a mock dragon. Zeke noticed Langus's fists tighten as anger surged beneath his calm exterior. Within the Eldragon family, hierarchy ruled everything. At the top were the Elder Dragons. Below them stood the adult dragons, captains and elite warriors. Then came the young dragons, followed by the lesser dragons. At the very bottom existed the mock dragons, those who had failed the Dragon's Nest entrance exam or could not graduate from the academy, discarded by society and deemed false. Yet Langus carried an unshaken determination. He believed that even mock dragons could possess true strength. Zeke stepped forward and asked how Retin could be so certain of Langus's worthlessness before the exam had even begun. Retin froze, shocked by the interruption. He demanded to know who Zeke was and why he dared challenge him. Zeke replied calmly that he held no personal hostility. He merely questioned why Retin believed Langus was incapable of success. Retin sneered and insisted that people like Langus were destined to fail. Zeke's gaze sharpened. He stated firmly that Langus was stronger than Retin and every bully standing beside him. Retin flushed with rage and accused Zeke of insulting them. Before the conflict could escalate further, an examiner arrived and ordered the students to line up. The entrance examination was about to begin. All applicants were instructed to register and receive a numbered tag. Retin glared at Zeke with undisguised hatred before turning away. Zeke muttered that there was no need to get angry, and that the youth of today were too hot-tempered. From behind, Langus reminded him that they were the same age and stated that anyone would get angry if Zeke told them he was stronger than them. Zeke then changed the topic, asking why those kids claimed it was impossible to clear the exam when the entrance examination was mandatory. Realizing that Zeke didn't know a single thing, Langus quietly explained that students were allowed to withdraw if they believed they lacked the ability to pass. The revelation surprised Zeke even more. Langus hesitated but suggested that it might be better for Zeke to withdraw and avoid getting hurt, an idea Zeke found hard to accept. Zeke smiled and stated firmly that someone with his potential had no right to withdraw. Without waiting for a response, he grabbed Langus by the arm and dragged him toward the examination ground. Inside, the examiner called all candidates forward and explained the rules. The objective was deceptively simple. Each participant had to leave even the slightest mark on the regeneration stone placed before them. Only weapons provided by the examiner were permitted, though bare hands were also allowed. Every candidate was given 3 attempts. Zeke showed little reaction. To him, the task appeared uncomplicated. Langus, however, was visibly shaken. While others whispered nervously, Zeke simply shrugged, wondering why the test caused such fear. After all, these same students had survived drinking dragon blood as infants. Compared to that ordeal, this challenge seemed mild. The first participant stepped forward and swung his sword with all his strength. A deafening clang echoed through the courtyard as the blade shattered instantly. The force rebounded violently, leaving the man screaming on the ground with shattered arms. Not a single scratch appeared on the stone. The examiner asked whether he wished to continue, but the candidate was already incapacitated and was carried away. Zeke noticed Langus's uneasy expression and questioned the cause. Langus explained that the object was a regeneration stone, an artifact that instantly repaired minor damage and reflected brute force attacks with 100-fold intensity. Zeke's expression finally shifted. Realizing the stone was far from ordinary, Langus continued, explaining that success depended on precisely circulating one's ether source. Martial strength alone was meaningless without absolute control over internal energy. Scanning the crowd, Zeke observed several participants with enough strength to succeed, including Retin and his group. Still, screams echoed across the grounds as candidates failed one after another, many leaving with broken limbs. When the examiner called candidate number 315, Zeke stepped forward. Langus panicked and urged him to withdraw, but Zeke reassured him calmly and continued without hesitation. As Zeke approached the stone, an immense pressure radiated from his body, causing even the examiner to pause. When asked to select a weapon, Zeke declined, indicating his fists were sufficient. Laughter erupted among the other students. Many mocked the decision, doubting anyone could harm the stone with bare hands. Even Langus grew anxious, convinced Zeke's arms would be destroyed, blaming himself for not stopping him earlier. With a nod from the examiner, Zeke was permitted to proceed. He stepped closer, carefully examining the stone's strange surface. He admitted to himself that it was composed of an unfamiliar mineral, likely formed over countless centuries. It reminded him how little he still understood about this world, but that knowledge could wait. Focusing entirely on the present, Zeke summoned his ether. A golden light enveloped his fists as he prepared his signature combat art. the Dragon Slayer form. A brilliant yellow aura erupted around his body. With a single decisive motion, Zeke drove his punch into the regeneration stone. The impact was catastrophic. The upper portion of the stone exploded violently, fragments scattering as a thunderous shockwave tore through the courtyard. Dust filled the air, forcing many students to shield their eyes. When the debris settled, silence followed. Zeke exhaled slowly, blood seeped from his arm, and his uniform was torn at the shoulder. Instead of pride, he felt disappointment, realizing his control was still imperfect. The surrounding students stared in disbelief. Retin fumed in anger, his confidence shattered. Langus stood frozen, jaw hanging open. Even the examiner appeared shaken, knowing that only someone of 4-star rank or higher should have been capable of such a strike, making Zeke's achievement as an illegitimate child even more unbelievable. The examiner studied Zeke closely, recognizing the technique. Zeke approached and asked whether he had passed. The examiner responded with a nod and handed him a small vial filled with glowing green liquid. When Zeke inquired about it, the junior examiner reacted with open hostility and motioned him aside. Assuming it was a reward, Zeke returned to Langus, who immediately praised the feat. When Zeke asked about the vial, Langus explained it was a grade 1 healing potion. Zeke examined it carefully. It did not appear poisonous, yet something felt unusual. Elixirs came to mind, rare substances crafted from hidden realm herbs and cores of divine or phantom beasts. True elixirs could heal wounds instantly and restore ether, though they were nearly impossible to create. After a brief hesitation, Zeke drank the potion. Instantly his wounds sealed, and the pain vanished completely. Zeke was stunned. This was no ordinary potion. It was genuine. Langus admitted he did not truly understand elixirs, only that the Lagan family's healing products were superior to anything outside their domain. While Langus found this normal, Zeke was shaken by the instant recovery. However, there was no surge of ether. Inspecting the empty vial again, Zeke realized the truth. This was humanity's finest creation, refined over centuries, yet still incomplete. Langus complimented him once more, calling him impressive. Zeke responded calmly that his only goal was to become the strongest, so the outcome came as no surprise. Soon after, Retin and his group stepped forward and completed the test successfully. Zeke was not fazed in the slightest. He had expected no less. Eventually, applicant number 414, Langus, was called. Zeke's timid, blue-haired friend stepped forward with hesitation, his movements stiff as he approached the regeneration stone. Zeke immediately noticed Langus's anxiety and urged him through calm gestures to steady his breathing and focus. Langus turned back briefly, clearly overwhelmed by the standard Zeke had just set during his own test. Taking a sword from the examiner, Langus positioned himself in front of the stone. Zeke watched closely, trying to understand what approach Langus intended to take. After inhaling deeply, Langus launched his strike. The blade barely scraped the surface. The stone remained unchanged. The rebound force sent Langus stumbling backward, nearly losing his balance. The examiner reminded him that he still had 2 remaining attempts. Forcing himself to continue, Langus attacked again, focusing harder than before. The result did not change. The regeneration stone showed no reaction at all. Frustration quickly took hold as doubt flooded his thoughts, his vision blurring while tears began to form. Retin and his group erupted into loud mockery, openly ridiculing Langus and declaring that a half-dragon like him would never succeed. Their laughter echoed previous insults, reinforcing the belief that Langus was inferior. The examiner then announced that Langus had only 1 attempt left. His hands trembled as fear clouded his concentration. Panic threatened to overwhelm him completely. At that critical moment, Zeke intervened. His presence cut through Langus's spiraling thoughts, pulling him back from despair. Zeke made it clear that continuing with the sword was pointless and pushed Langus to abandon it altogether. Instead, he encouraged him to switch weapons, insisting that repeating the same failure would never produce a different result. Retin and his companions laughed again, convinced that changing weapons would not help. They mocked the idea openly, pointing out that Langus had trained only with a sword. Remaining calm, Zeke confirmed with the examiner that switching weapons mid-test was permitted. The examiner approved without hesitation. Zeke then pressed Langus to stand his ground rather than collapse under fear. Refusing to give up, Langus steadied himself and accepted the advice. As he prepared, Langus briefly reflected on his father, an Eldragon who had been denied entry into the dragon's nest and endured endless ridicule. Despite that, his father never gave up and raised his son with patience and pride. Langus resolved to honor that sacrifice and prove he was not a fraud. Though unfamiliar with the spear, Langus chose to trust Zeke. He focused on a simple forward thrust, knowing success was unlikely, but failure was guaranteed if he didn't try. As he gripped the spear, Langus sensed his ether flowing differently, more naturally than it ever had with a sword. He charged forward. The spear struck. A powerful shockwave rippled through the air. Retin and his group laughed prematurely, convinced the attempt had failed, until the sound reached them. A visible crack spread across the regeneration stone. Silence followed. Langus had succeeded. The examiner froze in disbelief, staring at the fracture at Langus's feet. Zeke reacted instantly, clapping with pride as Langus stood motionless, struggling to process what he had just accomplished. The examiner recorded Langus's success. Overwhelmed, Langus sought confirmation from Zeke and was immediately pulled into a congratulatory embrace. Tears streamed down Langus's face as years of doubt finally collapsed. Retin and his companions refused to accept the outcome, dismissing it as pure luck. Their protests were silenced when the examiner loudly declared the examination concluded and announced the next stage, the entrance ceremony. Zeke was surprised, having assumed the test would involve far more than a single requirement. Langus warned him that additional trials could still await them inside the academy. Soon after, several figures radiating immense aura approached the grounds. Zeke's attention was drawn to one stern-looking individual in particular. Langus reacted in shock at Zeke's lack of restraint when he openly displayed his dislike toward the man, urging caution. Langus quickly tried to restrain him, and Zeke complied, silently observing the approaching elites. Among them were multiple 6-star warriors, but one presence dominated them all: Balza Eldragon, an 8-star powerhouse whose aura alone commanded overwhelming authority. Zeke noted that in his own era, only a handful of 8-star warriors had existed. He wondered how many remained in the present age. Balza Eldragon stepped forward, his aura crushing the air as he addressed the students, urging them to uphold the pride of the Eldragon bloodline. His presence caused many students to tremble, all except Zeke. Instead of fear, Zeke felt a deep, inexplicable hatred toward Balza Eldragon. Once Balza departed, another elder took charge, easing the tension slightly as he spoke of the academy's expectations. Though the pressure faded, the students still struggled to regain their composure. The examiner then announced the next matter: dormitory assignments. Zeke was surprised, having assumed all students would share the same living quarters. Langs explained that the academy was divided into 4 dorms: East, West, North, and South. Moments later, Zeke's name was called. He parted ways with Langus and followed the assigned directions, discovering he had been placed in the East dorm. As he navigated the sprawling halls, Zeke reflected on how drastically the academy had changed over the past millennium. Concerned he might be late, he hurried to his assigned room and pushed the door open, only to freeze in disbelief. Inside stood Langus. The coincidence stunned them both. The familiar presence immediately eased Langus's loneliness, while Zeke felt an unexpected sense of comfort. With training set to begin the following day and rest strictly enforced, the two settled in. Zeke felt mildly embarrassed for missing much of the orientation. Though Langus brushed it aside, Zeke reflected on his original plan to skip the academy and pursue adventure. Yet the unfamiliar world, powerful figures, and hidden mysteries sparked his curiosity. After 1,000 years, Zeke chose to remain for now. A full month passed as the children endured relentless training under the constant supervision of their tutor. They were drilled in mastering Dragon's Breath, a combat technique originally devised by the 15th head of the Eldragon family. The tutor moved steadily among the students, carefully observing their progress. Several had already grasped the fundamentals, including Laika, the daughter of the family head, who was recognized as a 2nd-star talent at a remarkably young age. Yet despite this, the tutor's attention kept returning to Zeke. He struggled to understand how Zeke achieved such efficiency without any formal guidance. The possibility that Zeke had inherited a dormant lineage power crossed his mind more than once. Meanwhile, Zeke quietly analyzed the technique itself. He compared the modern Dragon's Breath to the Dragon King's breath he once knew, noting how the current form absorbed ether from the surroundings and circulated it internally to amplify strength. Its effectiveness, he realized, depended entirely on the user's control and imagination. Although each noble house safeguarded its own variations, Zeke found the technique overly rigid. While safe and simple, it became almost useless when the user remained stationary. His original version allowed seamless movement while channeling ether, but its complexity had made it difficult to pass down. To strengthen the clan, the 15th head of the family had simplified it, making it simple for everyone. Impressed by its survival, Zeke wondered how many other martial arts had evolved over the century. Once training concluded, the students headed toward the dining hall. Most were exhausted, barely managing to eat. Zeke, however, consumed his meal without hesitation. Noticing Langus struggling, he urged him to eat properly, emphasizing the importance of maintaining energy. Langus, drained and confused, couldn't understand how Zeke remained so unaffected. Zeke responded lightly, teasing him for being weak and pushing him to work harder. As Zeke spoke, he noticed several disciplined students eating in silence. At that moment, Laika approached. Unaware of her identity, Zeke bluntly questioned who she was. Langus nearly choked, quickly explaining that she was Laika, the daughter of the Eldragon family head. Zeke admitted calmly that he had no idea. Langus panicked, reminding him that they had no standing to address her. Zeke dismissed the concern, pointing out that he too was a child of the family head, even if illegitimate. The revelation stunned both Langus and Laika. Laika, skeptical, questioned the claim. Zeke confirmed it without hesitation. Curious, She then pressed him about how he managed to shatter the regeneration stone with his bare hands. Zeke responded casually, brushing it off as nothing special. Leica stepped closer, her confidence evident, and proposed an alliance. Zeke was briefly caught off guard as she clarified her intention to make him her subordinate. She explained that as an illegitimate child he needed protection, and she intended to use his strength to secure her position as the next head of the Eldragon family, promising rewards in return. Despite her calculated charm, Zeke declined calmly. Leica misinterpreted his refusal, assuming he sought the family headship himself. She continued pressing the matter, unaware of his complete disinterest. Zeke instead quietly assessed her progress, noting her rapid growth towards second star status and acknowledging her talent. Eventually, he made it clear that while she was free to pursue her ambitions, he had no interest in family politics. The response shocked her. Growing frustrated, Leica demanded to know his true goal. In response, Zeke slammed his knife into the table, releasing a terrifying wave of aura that crushed the surrounding air. The message was unmistakable. He served no one, and desired only solitude. In his view, he had already surpassed everyone present. Leica staggered under the pressure, her confidence shattered. Zeke, unaffected, continued eating as if nothing had happened. Langus quickly intervened, attempting to defuse the situation. Leica, humiliated and furious, completely lost her composure and issued a duel challenge. Zeke reacted with mild surprise but remained unbothered. Word of the confrontation spread rapidly, drawing a large crowd to the training grounds. Langus grew anxious and reminded Zeke of the danger, but Zeke dismissed the concern, admitting he knew little about Leica. Sensing Langus behaving unusually formal, Zeke questioned him. Langus explained Leica's lineage. She carried Typhona blood, one of the 4 great families supporting the Eldragon house, and had mastered all sword techniques of House Typhona. Zeke listened with interest, remarking that knowing so little only made the situation more exciting. Langus scolded him, insisting he stood no chance and questioning why he accepted the duel. Zeke remained firm, believing refusal was never an option. As the duel began, Leica planted her sword into the ground, radiating determination. Langus retreated from the arena, urging caution. Left alone, Zeke finally sought to understand her obsession with defeating him. Leica revealed her ambition to become the family head, believing that defeating him would secure her claim and force him into service. Zeke was genuinely confused, questioning why any of this mattered to him at all. Leica, shocked by his indifference, explained the harsh reality. 5 heirs competed for the Eldragon headship, and Zeke was the only one without blood from the 4 great houses. Each contender sought to prove themselves within the academy, making allies essential. Zeke understood her reasoning, but remained unmoved. Without hesitation, Leica launched her attack. Zeke sidestepped effortlessly, her strike cracking the ground beneath them. Undeterred, she pressed on, swinging with increasing power and precision. Despite using a training sword, her skill impressed the onlookers, drawing cheers from the crowd. Fueled by their excitement, Leica intensified her assault. Yet no matter how fast or forceful her attacks became, Zeke moved with ease, weaving through her strikes without effort. Frustration mounted as she failed to land even a single hit. Zeke calmly observed her form, acknowledging her speed and technique, noting that she far exceeded the level of an ordinary 1-star warrior. Overcome with rage, Leica demanded that Zeke stop observing and finally engage. Zeke obliged. Evading her incoming strike with ease, he countered instantly, driving a powerful punch into her chest. The impact released a violent shockwave that rippled through her body, forcing blood from her lips as she collapsed to her knees. The arena fell into stunned silence. Leica lifted her head slowly, frustration carved into her expression. Despite her superior technique and speed, she could not understand why she had failed to land even a single decisive hit. Zeke acknowledged her speed, recognizing that she surpassed most 1-star warriors he had encountered. However, he viewed speed alone as insufficient. In his eyes, she remained firmly within the 1-star realm. Leica bristled at the assessment, pointing out that Zeke himself held the same rank. Zeke remained unfazed, having already anticipated her movements long before she acted. Her breathing rhythm, muscle tension, and even subtle shifts in her gaze betrayed her intentions. Combined with his vastly greater experience, her attacks were transparent to him. The calm confidence behind his assessment reignited her fury. Leica forced herself back to her feet and lunged again, sword raised with lethal intent. Zeke flipped backward, narrowly avoiding the strike. Her momentum left her exposed. Without hesitation, Zeke struck. The blow sent Leica crashing into the distant wall, dust erupting from the impact. Spectators gasped, uncertain whether she could even rise again. Langus rushed toward the arena in alarm, instinctively cheering for Zeke, but Zeke waved him back. The battle, he knew, was far from finished. Despite his overwhelming advantage, Zeke felt genuine admiration for Leica's resilience. As the dust settled, Leica pushed herself upright, bruised and bleeding but unbroken. Langus attempted to intervene, urging her to stop before the damage became irreversible. Zeke interrupted, making it clear that the next phase of the fight would be dangerous, and that responsibility for injuries could no longer be avoided. His suspicion was confirmed. Leica had awakened. A blazing aura spiraled outward as she rose, unmistakably signaling her entry into the two-star realm, where true source power manifested beyond the body. Her presence intensified instantly, pressing down on everyone watching. She acknowledged that Zeke's pressure had forced this breakthrough. Fueled by fury and exhilaration, Laika surged forward, her sword trailing golden lightning. Zeke grinned, recognizing the leap in both her speed and strength. He continued evading, deliberately testing her limits. Then, in a rare lapse, her blade grazed his face, leaving a shallow cut. Laika seized upon the moment. Her confidence flaring, she prepared to unveil her true inheritance, the Thunder Spirit Great Sword Arts. Rather than fear, Zeke felt exhilaration. The chance to witness a technique unknown to him thrilled him. Without warning, Laika unleashed Thunderblade Flash. Lightning erupted across the arena, striking Zeke before he could react. The sheer speed and power stunned him, leaving his body racked with pain. Still, his smile never faded. Further fueling Laika's anger, she followed with another lightning-charged strike, forcing Zeke to acknowledge that her current strength was overwhelming. His body screamed under the assault, yet the crowd remained transfixed. No one had expected a one-star warrior to endure such power. While absorbing the blows, Zeke analyzed her movements. Though her patterns remained familiar, her advancement to 2 stars had granted her explosive output far beyond anything warriors from a millennium ago had achieved. Her control over lightning was extraordinary. Zeke realized he could end the fight, but curiosity restrained him. He wanted to see the limits of her power. Laika, enraged by his unbroken grin, resolved to crush him completely. She surged forward with lethal intent, landing a devastating strike that sent Zeke crashing into the wall in a thunderous explosion. Dust filled the arena. When it cleared, Zeke was still standing. That sight shattered Laika's composure. She struck again, a lightning bolt slamming him to his knees. Langus rushed forward in desperation, but Laika refused to stop. As long as Zeke remained conscious, ending the duel would insult his pride. She issued a final ultimatum. Zeke remained silent. The pride of an Eldragon burned fiercely within him, and his silence spoke louder than any refusal. Enraged beyond restraint, Laika decided to finish it. She summoned her ultimate technique, Heavenly Thunder, channeling immense energy into a final strike. Lightning engulfed Zeke completely. His scream echoed across the arena as the ground shattered beneath him. When the storm subsided, his body lay motionless among the debris. Believing it finished, Laika planted her sword into the ground and turned away. Then she froze. Zeke was standing. His body crackled with electricity, arcs of lightning dancing across his skin. Even Zeke himself appeared stunned, uncertain of what had occurred. As he endured Laika's relentless assault, his Dragon King's breath had reacted to her lightning, merging with it rather than resisting. The foreign energy now coursed through his veins, amplifying his power. The impossible had happened. Zeke had adapted. The lightning had become his own. With newfound strength surging through him, Zeke acknowledged that Laika's attacks had forced his evolution. Through her fury, he had ascended. Zeke had entered the 2-star realm. Laika roared in frustration and launched another desperate strike. Zeke responded with calm confidence, making it clear through his composure that the battle was far from over. Now infused with lightning, Zeke moved at blinding speed. Power surged through his muscles and nerves like a raging storm. Though his movements were still unstable, he instinctively understood that mastery would come quickly. From the sidelines, Langus could barely track their motion. It became painfully clear that Zeke was now evading every one of Laika's attacks with ease. Laika's frustration deepened. She could no longer tell whether she was being tested or humiliated. Zeke, however, showed no malice. In his eyes, she remained a genuinely capable opponent. Driven to desperation, Laika unleashed a wide-range assault, flooding the arena with lightning. Zeke avoided it effortlessly. At that moment, he decided the fight had gone on long enough. With a calm smile, Zeke resolved to do something he had not attempted in a very long time: forge a new technique in the midst of battle. Laika hesitated, confusion flashing across her face. Then Zeke vanished. In the next instant, he reappeared directly before her and unleashed his newly created art, Dragon-Slaying Arts. Tempest of Thunder. A violent storm of lightning erupted, striking from all directions at once. The overwhelming force consumed Laika completely. She collapsed to her knees, defeated. The match was over. Barely able to move, Laika crawled toward her fallen sword, refusing to accept the outcome. Her long-held dream of surpassing her brothers and leading the Eldragon family felt as though it were slipping through her fingers. Zeke approached her without hostility. He acknowledged her strength, recognizing the battle as one worth remembering. More importantly, he valued what he had gained from it, the opportunity to learn something new. To him, the duel had never been meaningless. Laika could only stare at him in disbelief, her face flushed and her thoughts in turmoil, unable to comprehend the gap that separated them. Several hours later, deep within a dungeon, Balza Eldragon carved through hordes of monsters with effortless precision. Even the first stage of his dragon combat arts was enough to annihilate everything in his path. His movements were flawless, his breathing steady, showing no hint of fatigue. A messenger eventually reached him, delivering news of Laika's recent advancement to the 2-star realm. Balza showed no reaction. The messenger pressed on, emphasizing how extraordinary the achievement was for someone of her age. and speculating that she might reach 5 stars before graduation. Balza dismissed it coldly. Talent, in his eyes, meant nothing without proof earned through real combat. Then the messenger revealed the rest of the report. Laika had lost a duel. Balza initially assumed it was against a senior student, but the truth stopped him cold. The one who defeated her was none other than his illegitimate son, Zeke. For the first time, Balza paused. Memories surfaced of the woman who had given birth to the boy. She had possessed promise, yet she had vanished long before the child's birth. Balza frowned, unable to understand how Zeke could have developed such refined techniques without guidance. When informed that Zeke had reached the 2-star realm entirely on his own, without a master or family backing, something finally stirred within Balza. He declared that the time had come to begin the first trial. The messenger hesitated, warning that the trial was notoriously lethal. Balza cut him off without hesitation. In his view, only the strong deserved to survive. Those who failed were nothing more than burdens to be discarded. Before dismissing the messenger, Balza issued one final order: summon Ifreya. He wanted her to oversee the trial and observe the boy personally. As the messenger departed, Balza's stern expression softened into something rare: anticipation. For the first time, Balza Eldragon was genuinely curious to see what his son could become. The next day, on the academy training grounds, the students continued practicing the new dragon art combat technique. While most of them focused on mastering the technique, Zeke followed a different path. He lifted massive boulders weighing several times his own body, concentrating on physical training instead. Calmly, he thought that just like Dragon's Breath, the dragon combat art technique had been created by the 15 heads of the Eldragon family, and simplified so that even children could learn it. Langus noticed the difference and approached, confused by Zeke's unusual routine. Rather than explaining verbally, Zeke demonstrated. With a precise strike between Langus's shoulders, Zeke sent a controlled flow of ether through his body. Instantly, Langus felt the change. His energy circulation became smoother, more stable than ever before. The realization left Langus stunned. Zeke, however, appeared dissatisfied. To him, dragon combat arts were not simple, nor were they crude. They were structured, layered techniques refined across generations, each era adding depth and efficiency. As he continued training, Zeke recalled the form that had awakened during his battle with Laika, the perfected state of the dragon-slaying arts. He wondered how much it had diverged from its ancient origins. For now, he decided he had learned enough. He returned his focus to physical training. Before he could resume, Langus stepped forward and gathered his courage. He asked Zeke to train him as well, explaining that he wanted to grow stronger no matter how difficult the process became. The request caught Zeke slightly off guard. After a brief moment of consideration, Zeke acknowledged Langus's determination and agreed to guide him. Recognizing that Langus possessed a willingness to learn, Langus's face immediately lit up with excitement. Before the moment could settle, another presence made itself known. Laika stood several steps behind them, her posture tense yet resolute. Despite her lingering embarrassment from the duel, she openly expressed her desire to train under Zeke as well. Losing to him had shattered her pride, but it had also ignited her resolve. She wanted strength enough to surpass her brothers, and eventually even Zeke himself. Zeke studied her in silence while Laika waited anxiously for his response. When he did not answer right away, she questioned whether he truly accepted the idea, given that Zeke himself was also a contender for the Eldragon family succession. Langus supported her reasoning. Despite Zeke's illegitimate status, Balza Eldragon was still his father, making Zeke a legitimate heir regardless of his personal desires. Zeke finally responded, stating that he did not object. His only concern was Laika's physical condition. Based on his observations during their duel, her injuries should have required at least a month to heal fully. Laika quickly dismissed the concern, explaining that she had already consumed a healing potion. Zeke and Langus exchanged glances, quietly questioning whether such recovery was truly possible. Langus clarified that if Zeke was referring to the standard potion issued during the entrance exam, it would not have been nearly sufficient, as the family head's daughter Laika would have access to far superior elixirs reserved for the elite. Zeke sighed inwardly, acknowledging that this era's advancements continued to defy his expectations. Laika admitted that without the potion she would have been bedridden for weeks. Regardless, her request remained unchanged. She wanted Zeke's guidance. She acknowledged that Zeke needed to focus on his own growth as well, but still wished to learn from him. Zeke accepted without hesitation. He had never refused someone with genuine ambition. Both Laika and Langus were briefly stunned by how easily he agreed. They teased him lightly, pointing out that he was the same age as them. Zeke accepted the remark and casually questioned whether Laika truly wished to be trained by the very person who had defeated her. Laika reaffirmed her resolve. If she intended to become the next head of the Eldragon family, she could not afford pride or hesitation. Strength mattered more than dignity. Zeke recalled their first encounter when Laika had declared her ambition so openly. Curious, he pressed her on why she clung so fiercely to that goal. Without hesitation, Laika revealed the truth. If she failed to claim the family headship, she would be reduced to a political tool married off to preserve alliances and bloodlines. In the best case, she would be forced into marriage with a distant relative. In the worst, a complete stranger. Zeke's expression darkened. Laika explained further that the Eldragon bloodline was considered too valuable. especially among the 4 primary branches. Their source power was treated as a commodity, and purity of lineage was obsessively enforced. A terrifying aura burst from Zeke, causing Langus to shiver. Zeke's anger was unmistakable. He regarded such customs as vile and degenerate remnants of a fallen family. Inwardly, he vowed to destroy traditions that reduced people to tools. Before the tension could escalate further, several instructors arrived, drawing everyone's attention. Laika blinked in confusion, while Zeke silently cursed the timing, wondering if his outburst had been overheard. From among the instructors, a woman with blazing red hair stepped forward. One of the instructors announced that, starting that day, a new instructor would be taking charge. Someone influential enough to personally oversee their training, despite her busy schedule. As the red-haired woman approached, she reached toward Laika, confirming her identity. Sensing danger, Laika instinctively retreated. Zeke immediately stepped in front of her, shielding her without hesitation, while Langus clung nervously to Zeke's arm. The woman smiled faintly, praising Laika's sharp instincts and noting the quality of her aura. Zeke frowned. He had not sensed the woman's presence until she was already standing before them. Langus hesitantly asked who she was. The instructors introduced her as Ifreya, a member of the Black Dragon Corps. Ifreya greeted the students with calm confidence before turning her sharp gaze toward Zeke. She confirmed his identity and remarked on his composure, noting that he showed no surprise at her sudden appearance. Zeke responded coolly, stating that nothing about her actions startled him. He also observed her stealth technique, commenting on its refinement. Ifreya's eyes widened slightly. In that moment she understood why Balza Eldragon had taken such interest in Zeke. Meanwhile, Zeke studied her movements closely, noticing how her source power flowed downward, concentrated around her lower body in an unfamiliar pattern. The absence of sound in her steps now made sense. His curiosity deepened as he wondered what kind of martial art she practiced. Ifreya soon took command of the class, officially declaring herself their new instructor. Shocked murmurs rippled through the students. She was widely known by the title Tempest Wind, one of the most formidable warriors within the Eldragon family. Another instructor confirmed her status, a 6-star practitioner of the Black Dragon Corps, the elite force that served directly under the family head. The students stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend why someone of her caliber would personally oversee their training. Ifreya smiled faintly and announced that she would indeed train them, but only if they passed a test. The courtyard erupted with murmurs of surprise. She reassured them that the test was simple. Each student would receive a crystal identical to the one in her possession, and would be required to survive for 1 full month inside Poison Dragon Mountain. At the mention of Poison Dragon Mountain, Langus's face turned pale. Zeke, however, felt a faint sense of nostalgia. He remembered the mountain as a deadly region overrun with venomous plants and lethal creatures, where even brushing against a leaf could kill an ordinary human instantly. It was a land saturated with death. In his previous life, Zeke had used that mountain as his personal training ground. Even so, he believed the test was excessively cruel for students of their age. Ifreya began explaining the rules. Each student would receive a single crystal orb. Losing it or allowing it to be destroyed would result in immediate disqualification and expulsion from the dragon's nest. She clarified that poison alone was not the greatest threat. As long as dragon's breath was maintained properly, their bodies would resist most toxins. However, losing control of their breathing or dropping the orb would drastically reduce their chances of survival. Laika raised another concern. The mountain was also infested with monsters. Ifreya responded coldly, making it clear that those creatures would serve as food. Anyone unable to kill them would not survive long regardless. Fear spread rapidly through the group. Many students doubted whether their basic combat art Strike Dragon could even injure such creatures. Anxiety crept into their expressions as the reality of the trial settled in. Ifreya showed no sympathy. She announced that they would be given 5 days to prepare. During that time, each student could select one basic weapon art from the Eldragon family archive. Successfully grasping it would improve survival odds, but failure would carry no forgiveness. When concerns were raised about outside intervention, Ifreya made her stance unmistakably clear. This was the dragon's nest, the core of the Eldragon family. The weak were meant to perish, and only the strong would endure. The students stood frozen under the weight of her words. Langus looked on the verge of panic. Laika remained silent, carefully processing the situation. Zeke frowned slightly, wondering if this merciless philosophy truly belonged to the same Eldragon family he once ruled. After concluding the briefing, Ifreya distributed manuals for various weapon arts, and instructed everyone to step forward and choose carefully. Langus hesitated, unsure which path to take. Zeke advised him to select a spear art, reminding him of his success with the weapon during the entrance exam. Langus nodded gratefully and followed the advice. Laika initially reached for a great sword manual, confident in her familiarity with lightning sword techniques. Zeke stopped her and instead recommended axe arts, explaining that it would correct her balance and stabilize her power output. Trusting his judgment, Laika accepted without argument. Once all selections were made, Ifreya warned them to use the remaining 5 days wisely. Their lives would depend entirely on how well they mastered their chosen techniques. Just as she turned to leave, Ifreya paused, and delivered one final revelation. During the trial, senior students would also participate. Their mission would be to hunt the new students and steal their orbs. Shock rippled through the group. The senior batch, 10 years older, would act as hunters while the newcomers became prey. Although the mountain's vast terrain offered opportunities to hide, the seniors would pursue them relentlessly. With that final warning, Freya departed. Langis stood frozen, terror evident on his face. Facing poisonous beasts alone was frightening enough, but now they also had to avoid stronger upper-class students. Leica assessed the situation calmly. Every senior was at least 1 star above them. If several attacked at once, survival would be uncertain. Zeke agreed and suggested forming small groups of 2 or 3. Cooperation was not forbidden, and survival would depend on shared defense, food, and vigilance. When Langus asked about Zeke's plan, Zeke made it clear that he intended to enter the mountain alone. To him, the trial was something to be experienced rather than feared. Leica shook her head, unsurprised by his decision. Before continuing preparations, Zeke suggested eating first. 5 days later, the students gathered at the base of Poison Dragon Mountain, their expressions a mix of dread and determination. Freya stood before them, her crimson hair blazing beneath the sunlight, confidence radiating from her stance. With a single announcement, she declared the start of the trial. Beside Leica, Langus swallowed hard. Despite following Zeke's strategy, doubt gnawed at him. He questioned whether someone like himself, a commoner, who had not yet awakened his first star, belonged on Leica's team. His thoughts were interrupted when Raymond and Selena approached, both wearing tense smiles. Selena admitted her disbelief at being chosen, given her status as a commoner from the East Hall. Raymond shared the same uncertainty. Leica made her stance clear. Status meant nothing to her. She had chosen them based on potential and trust, not bloodline. Hearing this, Langus tightened his grip on his spear and steadied his breathing. He resolved not to become a burden. Raymond nodded firmly, sharing the same determination. Leica placed her faith in every member of her team. Leica's gaze eventually shifted toward Zeke. She carefully studied him, clearly aware that he intended to face the trial alone. Zeke responded with quiet confidence, his expression making it clear that this was exactly what he had been waiting for. Selena watched him in awe, astonished by the thought of anyone challenging Poison Dragon Mountain without a team. Raymond, arms crossed, initially attributed Zeke's confidence to his lineage, noting that both Zeke and Leica were descendants of family heads. Leica quickly dismissed the idea of joining him, admitting that even with a strong team, she felt genuine unease about the trial ahead. Zeke tilted his head in mild surprise at her concern. From his perspective, her team was among the strongest present, balanced perfectly between offense and defense. The others exchanged uneasy glances, finding his casual assessment almost laughable given the danger they were about to face. Langus quietly pointed out that there were plenty of reasons to be afraid. Leica pressed further, curious whether Zeke truly believed her team would succeed. Zeke affirmed his confidence without hesitation, inwardly acknowledging Leica's keen eye for talent. In his assessment, her group's coordination and balance would allow them to clear the trial smoothly. Langus, drenched in nervous sweat, could only remark that Zeke's confidence bordered on absurd. At that moment, Freya stepped forward once more to address the assembled students. Most had already formed groups, speaking in hushed voices. It was clear that those who had not fully mastered their weapon arts had chosen teamwork as their means of survival, a wise decision given what lay beyond the fog-covered peaks of Poison Dragon Mountain. Freya reiterated the rules. The students were required to survive inside the mountain for an entire month while protecting their crystal orbs. Losing an orb meant instant failure. Since every orb was identical, theft was not only possible but expected. A wave of tension swept through the crowd. Zeke immediately grasped the true nature of the trial. This was not merely a test of endurance, but a ruthless contest of strategy, awareness, and strength. Freya continued, explaining that once the new students had entered and established themselves, the senior students would be released into the mountain to hunt them down and seize their orbs. The seniors reacted with open arrogance, mocking the newcomers and boasting about how easy it would be to take orbs from students who had yet to reach 1 star. Their laughter stirred fear, excitement, and unease among the first-year students. With the briefing complete, Freya signaled the start of the trial. In an instant, the students surged toward the mist-shrouded mountain, determination burning in their eyes. One by one, their figures vanished into the fog. As Zeke lingered behind, Leica turned back briefly, clearly hoping he would return safely. Zeke responded with a relaxed smile, offering reassurance before giving her team a final wave. Leica signaled her group to move out. Freya then called for Zeke. He acknowledged her calmly and proceeded toward the mountain's shadowy entrance without hesitation. As she watched him disappear into the mist, Freya silently noted just how unusual he truly was. Later that night, at the camp stationed outside Poison Dragon Mountain, concern spread among the instructors. Several questioned whether the new students could survive such a brutal test, given their limited experience and low star ranks. Freya remained unconcerned. From her perspective, most of the poisonous beasts within the mountain were only 1 or 2 star threats, dangerous but manageable. She expressed confidence that the students would endure. However, once the others turned away, her expression shifted subtly. Something far more dangerous remained sealed within the mountain, and she knew it would not stay contained for long. Soon after, Freya announced the beginning of the senior students phase. Under the moonlight, the upperclassmen charged into the mountain, weapons gleaming and expressions predatory. Freya watched them vanish into the fog, quietly anticipating the chaos that would follow. Deep inside Poison Dragon Mountain, the hunt began. One group of senior students soon spotted their first target, Zeke, standing motionless near the mountain's entrance. They mocked his stillness, assuming him to be careless or inexperienced. A crossbow bolt was fired without hesitation. Before it could reach him, Zeke caught the arrow effortlessly between his fingers. The seniors froze in disbelief as he calmly snapped it in half. Before they could react, he reappeared directly in front of them, his eyes sharp with anticipation. Excitement flickered across his face as he prepared to engage. The hunters had become the hunted. Elsewhere within the mountain, Laika's group was locked in combat with amphibious beasts native to the region. After Selena struck down a massive frog-like creature, another leapt toward her from behind. Raymond reacted instantly. He raised his shield, blocking the attack before slamming it forward with crushing force. The creature was knocked to the ground and finished with a precise thrust. Nearby, Langus succeeded in defeating his own opponent. Seeing their progress, Raymond allowed himself a brief smile. Their coordination had improved significantly. Laika acknowledged their teamwork with quiet approval, and both Selena and Raymond felt renewed confidence in their survival. Langus froze when his gaze landed on the enormous pile of slain monsters scattered around Laika. She stood calmly among the corpses, her posture relaxed, as if the battle had barely begun. Selena watched in open admiration, deeply impressed by Laika's overwhelming strength. Raymond shared the sentiment, recognizing that while the rest of them had struggled against only a handful of creatures, Laika had already eliminated the majority on her own. Laika dismissed the praise casually. To her, these monsters had been nothing more than warm-ups. As a two-star warrior, such opponents posed little threat. She also pointed out that her teammates had grown significantly since the exam, especially Selena and Raymond, both of whom had successfully awakened their first star. Selena expressed sincere gratitude, while Raymond acknowledged the progress with quiet pride. Langus, however, lowered his gaze. He was the only one among them who had yet to awaken a star. Noticing this, Selena gently reassured him, reminding him that growth came at different paces. Raymond echoed her encouragement, urging him to remain patient and continue striving forward. Their words eased Langus's tension, drawing a faint smile from him. Laika then reminded Langus of his own achievements. He had defeated multiple giant frog monsters on his own despite being starless. Since the entrance exam, he had trained closely under Zeke and had already refined his spear techniques to a high level. Awakening his first star was only a matter of time. Hearing this, Langus felt a surge of emotion tighten his chest. As the sky darkened, Laika observed that night was approaching. Everyone agreed it was time to return, knowing Poison Dragon Mountain became far more dangerous after sunset. Just as they began moving, Laika suddenly stopped. Her expression sharpened as she focused on a figure lingering near their base. Achan upperclassman stepped out from the tall grass, a confident smirk on his face. Selena and Raymond reacted instantly, drawing their weapons. Laika recognized the intruder as one of the senior students and understood his intent immediately. Before the situation could escalate further, 3 additional upperclassmen emerged from concealment, each radiating 1-star energy. Their leader stepped forward, clearly intent on taking their crystal orbs. The senior leader launched himself toward Laika without hesitation. She sidestepped effortlessly and signaled her team to maintain a defensive formation while she handled the threat herself. Langus found himself locked in combat with another upperclassman. His opponent mocked him relentlessly, dismissing him as a starless student with no chance of victory. Langus faltered briefly, then he remembered Zeke's teachings. Zeke had once explained that surrender was only logical against enemies far beyond one's level, but against an opponent close in strength, victory was still possible, not by forcing an opening, but by enduring until one appeared naturally. That memory steadied Langus's breathing. He focused solely on survival, absorbing each blow and refusing to panic. His opponent grew increasingly frustrated, attacking with greater aggression and less control. Then it happened. In a single reckless strike, the upperclassman exposed himself. Langus reacted instantly. Tightening his grip, he shifted his stance and drove his spear forward with everything he had accumulated through training and resolve. The attack pierced cleanly through the enemy's guard. The upperclassman gasped, staggered, and collapsed as consciousness faded. As the body hit the ground, a soft, radiant glow emerged from Langus's chest. His first star had awakened. Laika noticed it immediately. Her eyes widened. Langus had achieved his breakthrough in real combat, relying solely on discipline and perseverance. Meanwhile, the upperclassman leader stared in disbelief. Despite also being a 2-star warrior, he could not understand why Laika's strength overwhelmed him so completely. Laika knew the reason. Since mastering the axe-based techniques Zeke had advised her to learn, her ability to channel force and momentum through her greatsword had increased dramatically. The difference between them was not luck, it was refinement. With golden arcs of lightning gathering around her blade, Laika advanced. In a single decisive strike, she shattered the leader's defense and ended the battle instantly. Once all enemies were confirmed down, Leica returned to her team and ensured no one had been seriously injured. Relief washed over the group. Cheers rose naturally as the tension finally released. They had survived, and won their first true battle against upperclassmen. Selena and Raymond turned to Langus with genuine smiles, congratulating him on awakening his first star. Langus returned their expressions, pride swelling in his chest. For the first time, he stood among them as an equal. Leica looked over her team with quiet satisfaction. Every member had now awakened at least one star. With this, the trials ahead would become far more manageable. Yet her gaze drifted toward the deeper regions of Poison Dragon Mountain. She couldn't help but wonder how Zeke was faring. Elsewhere within the mountain, the previous upperclassmen fled blindly through the forest. Trembling uncontrollably, tears streamed down her face as panic consumed her. Her mind replayed a single terrifying presence. Zeke, whatever that boy truly was, it was far beyond anything she had expected. Moments later, chaos erupted among the upperclassmen. They scattered in every direction, shouting desperately for help, praying that Zeke would not continue his pursuit. Panic consumed them as survival instincts overpowered pride. Zeke advanced at an unhurried pace, dragging one of the unconscious upperclassmen behind him. Each step echoed through the forest like the approach of a predator. The survivors cursed in terror, their minds unable to comprehend what kind of existence they were facing. Slung casually over Zeke's shoulder was the massive corpse of a serpent-like monster. The sight alone shattered what remained of their composure. Zeke appeared amused, his expression darkly playful, as if the carnage around him were nothing more than entertainment. The fleeing students labeled him insane as they ran. Some muttered in disbelief, questioning how a lower classman had become the hunter while they, the supposed elites, were reduced to prey. This was not how the trial was meant to unfold. Suddenly, one of the upperclassmen tripped and crashed to the ground. As he struggled to rise, his body froze. Zeke was already standing in front of him. Faint crimson light glimmered in Zeke's eyes beneath the dim forest canopy. His expression held boredom rather than anger. He extended a hand as if offering assistance, making it clear through his posture that once the boy stood, the fight would resume. Before anything else could happen, the upperclassman's terror overwhelmed him. His eyes rolled back and he collapsed unconscious without resistance. Zeke paused, blinking in confusion. He tilted his head, genuinely puzzled by their reactions. The confidence they had shown earlier was gone, replaced by fear and desperation, openly inviting them not to abandon him so quickly. Then something shifted. Zeke sensed it, a hidden presence nearby. Turning sharply, he addressed the unseen observer, openly acknowledging their curiosity and daring them to step closer. When no response came, he let out a quiet, unsettling chuckle. Since he was merely being watched, he saw no reason to restrain himself any longer. His demeanor hardened. The game was no longer restrained. From the shadows, a man stepped forward, one of the overseers assigned to monitor the examination. Sweat streamed down his face as he stared at Zeke in disbelief. Not only had Zeke crushed opponents far above his rank, but he had also detected concealed surveillance with ease. The overseer understood immediately that this was no ordinary prodigy. Without hesitation, he resolved to report everything. Outside Poison Dragon Mountain, within the examination camp, Ifreya listened calmly as observers delivered their reports. 1 week had passed since the trial began. Nearly a third of the lower classmen had already withdrawn, while the remaining students were slowly adapting to the toxic environment. This aligned with her expectations. When she asked about the upperclassmen, however, the observers exchanged uneasy glances. At her insistence, the truth emerged. The upperclassmen were running. Ifreya frowned. There were no monsters within Poison Dragon Mountain capable of forcing such a retreat. When pressed further, the observers revealed the reason. They were fleeing from Zeke, not from beasts, not from poison, from a single student. According to the reports, Zeke had been hunting the upperclassmen relentlessly. At first, they attempted resistance. Now they did nothing but flee. Some observers admitted that Zeke appeared almost gleeful, treating the entire ordeal like a game. He cut down opponents one after another with a smile that chilled even seasoned warriors. Others agreed grimly. Even as the son of the Eldragon family head, Zeke radiated something fundamentally different. An aura that felt dark, alien, and unnatural. To them, he was no longer merely a genius. He was a monster wearing human form. Ifreya absorbed the reports in silence. She admitted that she had suspected as much from the beginning. Zeke had entered the trial alone, completely unbothered by the dangers of Poison Dragon Mountain. That alone revealed his true intent. He had never planned to avoid the upperclassmen. From the very start, he had intended to hunt them. The memory of their first meeting surfaced in her mind, those sharp, fearless eyes that carried a predatory calm. Even now, the recollection sent a faint chill through her. Perhaps, she acknowledged inwardly, the rumors were correct. Suddenly, one of the observers frowned, tilting her head as a distant sound echoed through the camp. Ifreya's lips curved into a knowing smile. This was exactly what she had been waiting for. A man approached and bowed respectfully, asking where the cage should be placed. If Freya directed him toward an open area of ground and dismissed him with approval, the observers turned, their expressions drained of color. A massive cage stood before them, its interior shrouded in darkness. A deep guttural growl resonated from within, shaking the air itself. The aura leaking from the cage was suffocating, unmistakably that of a 3-star monster, far beyond what any examinee should face. Some demanded to know what kind of creature was contained inside. Others questioned whether releasing such a beast was madness. If Freya remained perfectly calm, the creature, she explained, had been conditioned. It would only attack individuals who had reached 2-star strength or higher. The weaker students would remain unharmed. Still uneasy, one observer questioned why such a thing was being unleashed now. If Freya stated that it was a direct order from Balza Eldragon, yet privately, she acknowledged her true motivation. She wanted to see the truth with her own eyes. The soldiers already whispered of Zeke as a monster. Now she wanted proof. Could he stand against a creature like that? Her decision made, Freya issued the final command. The cage would be opened at dawn. The real trial was about to begin. At dawn, deep within Poison Dragon Mountain, Langus and his team came to an abrupt halt as the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Leica narrowed her eyes, a sense of unease crawling up her spine. Something about the vibration felt wrong, unnatural. Raymond considered the possibility that the disturbance was caused by upperclassmen, but Langus rejected the idea immediately. The pressure in the air felt far too heavy, more like the presence of a massive beast. Even so, Leica sensed something different. This was not the erratic rage of a common monster. Before anyone could react, a second tremor tore through the forest, far more violent than the first. A towering tree cracked at its base and collapsed toward them. Leica's instincts flared, and she reacted instantly, forcing the group to scatter just as the massive trunk slammed into the ground, sending debris flying. As the dust settled, the team turned back and froze. Emerging from the haze was a colossal stone golem. Its body towered above the forest canopy, carved from ancient rock, its faintly glowing eyes locking onto them as it began to move. Fear washed over the group. On the opposite side of Poison Dragon Mountain, Zeke sat perched atop a mountain of fallen monsters and defeated upperclassmen. Bodies lay scattered in every direction like discarded remnants. Resting his elbow on his knee, he gazed across the battlefield with a look of near boredom. The thrill of the examination had long since faded. No upperclassmen dared approach him anymore. No challengers attempted to reclaim their pride. Even the observers had stopped watching him, as if they had silently accepted that Zeke existed beyond their control. The silence irritated him. Just as he considered whether to sleep or hunt something new, a subtle ripple brushed against his senses. Zeke straightened. The aura was distant, originating from the far side of the mountain. At first he assumed it belonged to an ordinary 2-star creature, but the longer he focused, the clearer it became. This presence was heavier, older, far more oppressive. A 3-star entity. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Such creatures were never meant to appear during an examination. Poison Dragon Mountain was dangerous, but regulated. Allowing a 3-star monster to roam freely was reckless. Zeke briefly considered that the creature might have been hidden deep within the mountain for centuries, perhaps even 1,000 years, undisturbed until now. If so, the entire trial was already spiraling into chaos. The thought irritated him. Even Leica, with her talent and potential, would struggle against something like that. The instructors should have ensured nothing of that caliber remained. Then another possibility surfaced. What if this was intentional? What if Ifrubia and the others had allowed it to remain to test something, or someone? Zeke dismissed the thought with a shake of his head. Whatever the reason, one truth was undeniable. His boredom was gone. The presence still lingered far away, seemingly unaware of him. Zeke found that amusing. Waiting had never been his style. A faint grin formed as he rose from the pile of defeated enemies and began moving toward the distant aura with relaxed confidence. Back on Leica's side of the mountain, Selena acted first. She launched a fully powered strike at the golem, her weapon cutting through the air and crashing against its stone body. The impact echoed through the forest. Nothing happened, not even a tremor. Selena staggered back in disbelief. Unwilling to accept the result, Raymond charged forward and slammed his shield into the golem with all his strength. The collision sent a shockwave through the trees, but the creature did not move an inch. Pain surged through Raymond's arms as the force rebounded. The golem remained motionless. Gathering her aura, Leica stepped forward. Lightning surged around her blade as she focused her power and struck with precision rather than force. This time, a thin scratch appeared across the golem's arm. It was shallow, barely noticeable, but undeniable. Leica immediately understood the truth. Only someone with 2-star strength could damage the creature at all. Her 1-star companions simply lacked the power to pierce its hardened shell. Langus immediately turned to Leica, seeking direction as the towering golem loomed before them. Leica kept her eyes locked on the creature, issuing swift instructions through gestures and sharp focus. Her plan was clear. She would draw the golem's attention while the others used the opening to escape. Langus reacted without hesitation, rejecting the idea outright. Abandoning Leica was unthinkable. Raymond echoed the sentiment, stepping forward to argue that even if they lacked the power to harm the golem directly, they could still support her. By coordinating their movements, they could ensure every opening Leica created was fully exploited. Selena agreed, emphasizing that distraction and timing could still turn the battle in their favor. Their resolve softened Laika's expression. Seeing their determination and refusal to retreat, she chose to trust them. As Laika gathered lightning and condensed her aura into her blade once more, Raymond raised his shield and braced himself. Langus and Selena adjusted their grips, preparing to strike in unison the moment an opportunity appeared. Laika surged forward first. The golem reacted instantly, swinging its massive arm toward her. Raymond leapt into its path, blocking the blow with his shield. The impact was overwhelming. The raw strength of a 3-star creature sent him stumbling backward, barely maintaining his footing. Langus and Selena attacked from opposite sides, their strikes unable to damage the golem but successful in drawing its attention away from Laika. That moment was enough. Laika slipped behind the creature, her sword blazing with concentrated lightning. She unleashed her great sword technique, Heaven's Thunder, pouring every remaining fragment of source power into the strike. A colossal explosion erupted. The forest of Poison Dragon Mountain shook violently. Trees bent under the shockwave as light tore through the air. When the dust finally settled, Langus rushed to Laika's side, helping steady her as exhaustion overtook her body. Though unharmed, she had completely depleted her source power. Selena supported Raymond, who confirmed he was still standing despite the strain. Just as Laika prepared to order a retreat, her expression shifted. The presence had not vanished. Before anyone could react, she shoved Langus aside. A massive stone hand seized her mid-movement, lifting her effortlessly off the ground. The golem was still alive. Shock rippled through the group. Selena struggled to comprehend how the creature could still move after such devastation. Langus panicked, charged forward with his spear, but the golem swung Laika violently, using her body as a shield and forcing Langus to halt. Desperation mounted. Then the air roared. A massive tree came hurtling through the forest, slamming into the golem with crushing force. The impact shattered its grip, sending Laika tumbling free. Langus caught her and pulled her clear as the creature staggered. Still disoriented, Laika struggled to understand what had saved her. That was when a familiar presence emerged. Zeke stepped into view, his tone calm and unmistakable. Rather than checking Laika's injuries, his attention fixed immediately on the golem. His eyes gleamed with curiosity, and a faint smile formed as he studied the massive clay-like body before him. Moments earlier, Zeke had sensed the clash from afar. A brilliant flash of golden lightning had streaked across the tree line, and he had recognized it instantly. It was Laika's aura. Realizing her group had encountered the 3-star monster first, Zeke forced his body into a full sprint. In his previous life, the distance would have meant nothing. Now every step felt heavy. The gap between his former peak and his current limitations gnawed at him, fueling his irritation. Still, he pushed forward, knowing that even the most talented novices would struggle against a 3-star creature. Mid-stride, an idea struck him. Zeke veered aside, gripping the trunk of a massive tree. With a surge of physical strength reinforced by refined technique, he tore it free from the earth. Soil scattered as he spun and hurled the trunk toward the battle like a colossal spear. Watching the result, Zeke allowed himself a thin smile. The technique had worked better than expected. It was a newly learned art, nurturing dragon-throwing arts, a foundational technique emphasizing body control, source circulation, and efficient motion rather than raw destruction. Simple but perfectly suited to his current condition. Still, Zeke knew the truth. Throwing a tree would never be enough to kill a 3-star golem. With that understanding, he resumed moving forward. When Zeke finally arrived at the battlefield, Langus rushed toward him, disbelief written clearly across his face. Zeke immediately assessed their condition and confirmed that everyone was still alive. Langus dismissed their injuries as irrelevant and emphasized that the true danger was the monstrous golem before them. Zeke's gaze sharpened as he studied the creature more closely. The name golem settled in his mind, yet something about it felt fundamentally wrong. Although its presence was overwhelming, he sensed no life force within it, only hollow power bound into stone. The golem rose again from the rubble like an ancient titan awakening. Without warning, it lunged towards Zeke with terrifying speed. Laika and Langus reacted instinctively, but Zeke did not retreat. He raised a single hand and caught the golem's colossal fist mid-strike. The impact shattered the earth beneath his feet, cracks racing outward through the ground. Yet Zeke remained unmoved. He calmly evaluated the creature, acknowledging the durability of its stone exterior. Pure physical strength would take far too long to wear it down. Aura was required to pierce such a shell. With a casual motion, Zeke shoved the golem's arm aside, clearly unimpressed. To him, defeating such an opponent through prolonged brute force felt tedious. Laika, exhausted and shaken, could only observe in disbelief, while Langus stood frozen, unable to process how Zeke could regard such a threat as dull after everything they had endured. The golem recovered and prepared another devastating strike. Zeke blocked the next blow head-on, the collision sending thunderous vibrations through the forest. Trees shook violently, and the ground groaned beneath the force. Even while defending, Zeke remained composed. He quickly assessed the terrain and recognized the danger of continuing the battle there. The open clearing left Laika's group exposed. If they remained nearby, they would inevitably be caught in the crossfire again. Without hesitation, Zeke created an opening. Laika, Raymond, Selena, and Langus reacted instantly. retreating across shattered ground until they reached a safe distance. Only once Zeke was certain they were clear did he turn his full attention back to the golem. Planting his feet, Zeke gathered strength through his legs and twisted his body with explosive force. He hurled the massive golem across the clearing. The creature tore through boulders, uprooted stone, and gouged deep scars into the earth before skidding to a grinding halt. As the golem struggled to rise, Zeke observed its construction with keen interest. Its outer shell was exceptionally resilient. That only made things more interesting. Aura surged around Zeke's fists as he dashed forward with blistering speed. He questioned whether the golem's interior was as indestructible as its exterior. Leaping high into the air, Zeke hovered for a brief instant above the creature. Then he unleashed the first form of the Dragon Destruction Combat Arts Burst World. His fist struck. A blinding explosion erupted across the battlefield. The forest shook violently, as shards of stone and fragments of the golem's armor blasted outward in every direction. The creature's core destabilized instantly. Zeke's approach was simple. Rather than grinding down the golem's defenses layer by layer, Burst World injected concentrated source power directly into its body, destroying it from within. As the golem's massive form split apart and collapsed, Zeke felt a surge of exhilaration. The technique had worked perfectly. Destroying an enemy in such a decisive manner reignited his excitement. For the first time in a while, the battle had been entertaining. 1 month later, within the central estate of Eldrian State, Zeke walked through vast marble corridors lined with ancient tapestries. Irritation lingered on his face. His training had been abruptly interrupted by a summons he had no interest in answering. The reason soon became clear. The Poison Dragon Mountain examination had officially concluded. Despite the unexpected appearance of the 3-star golem, no further large-scale casualties had occurred. Even so, the brutality of the trial had been unforgiving. Only 30% of the 7-year-old examinees had survived to the end. However, every survivor had met the standards. Each had advanced to 1-star level through relentless exposure to danger. Now, with the examination complete, Zeke had been summoned directly by Balza Eldragon, the head of the Eldragon family. As Zeke walked alongside of Freya through a long corridor, she explained the reason for the summons. His actions during the examination had drawn the attention of the entire family leadership. Zeke's behavior had not merely been disruptive, it had overturned the structure of the trial itself. The upperclassmen phase of the exam had been designed for senior students to hunt lowerclassmen and seize their crystal orbs. Instead, Zeke had reversed the roles entirely. He hunted them. Every upper-class man who crossed his path had been defeated. Not a single one succeeded in stealing an orb. As a result, the entire upperclassman cohort had been forced to retake the examination. It was an unprecedented humiliation. While Zeke's actions violated no written rules, no one had ever imagined that a lower-classman would be bold or reckless enough to do what he had done. If Freya warned him that his conduct had placed him directly under scrutiny, his defiance, his disregard for hierarchy, and his open arrogance had ensured that Balza Eldragon would not view him lightly. As they neared the doors to the family head's office, Freya urged Zeke to temper his attitude. Speaking carelessly before the master head could easily cost him his life. Zeke, however, remained indifferent. When they reached the towering doors, Freya wasted no time. She knocked firmly and announced her arrival with rigid formality, stating that she had brought Zeke in accordance with the master head's summons. A deep, commanding presence responded from within, granting them entry. As they stepped inside, Freya reiterated that Zeke had been delivered exactly as ordered. Balza Eldragon finished the final stroke of his writing before lifting his head. His gaze settled on Zeke, cold, unreadable, and heavy with authority. Balza immediately addressed the issue that had shaken the entire examination. He questioned Zeke's assault on the upperclassmen during the trial. Zeke showed no concern. His posture and expression suggested exhaustion rather than fear. Instead of offering an explanation, he questioned whether any rule had forbidden him from attacking upperclassmen in the first place. Balza's eyes narrowed slightly, demanding clarification. Zeke laid out his reasoning plainly. The examination's only stated conditions were survival for 1 month within Poison Dragon Mountain and the protection of one's crystal orb. No additional restrictions had been announced. Within those boundaries, Zeke had simply exercised the freedom allowed to him. If certain actions were prohibited, then those limitations should have been clearly defined beforehand. As Zeke continued, Freya felt her blood run cold. She reacted in panic, realizing how reckless his words sounded before the master head. But before she could intervene further, Balza's patience shattered. A crushing dragon aura erupted from him. The pressure was immediate and overwhelming. Freya collapsed to her knees, trembling beneath the suffocating force. She was certain that if the aura persisted, Zeke would be killed without hesitation. Yet Zeke remained standing, unaffected. Balza's immense aura washed over him like a passing wind. The contrast was so extreme that Freya could barely process what she was witnessing. Irritation flickered across Zeke's face. He lifted his head slightly, signaling his displeasure at the attempt to intimidate him. Balza's expression darkened. Still kneeling, Freya struggled even to breathe as Zeke bluntly questioned whether he had been summoned merely to answer such trivial accusations. Balza withdrew his aura and regained his composure. His focus sharpened as he shifted the conversation. According to the examination records, Zeke had not only subdued upperclassmen, but had also destroyed a 3-star golem, an achievement that should have been impossible for someone of his age and rank. Even more troubling was the fact that Zeke had remained calm under the full pressure of the Masterhead's aura. Balza demanded an explanation. How could a child born outside formal lineage wield such incomprehensible power? Zeke met his gaze without hesitation. He questioned whether Balza truly wished to know the source of his strength. Then, with unwavering confidence, Zeke answered simply by asserting his own existence. The response left Balza momentarily speechless. An uncomfortable silence stretched between father and son, heavy with tension and unspoken history. Finally, Balza exhaled and acknowledged that Zeke's temperament was every bit as problematic as the reports claimed. Even so, results could not be ignored. Regardless of Zeke's insolence, the destruction of a 3-star golem was an achievement worthy of recognition. Balza announced that Zeke would be granted a reward of his choosing. He could claim a single item from the Dragon Treasury, or he could receive access to the 2nd floor of the Dragon Hall. If Freya was stunned, both locations were sacred to the Eldragon family. Since the era of the founding patriarch Gillisaragan, they had preserved the family's greatest legacies. The Dragon Hall safeguarded ancient manuscripts, including forbidden techniques sealed due to their danger. The Dragon Treasury contained relics of past family heads, legendary weapons, rare spirit medicines, ancient artifacts, and priceless heirlooms. Access to either was reserved for only the most exceptional individuals. Yet Balza was offering such a privilege to Zeke despite his blatant disrespect. Zeke, however, showed no gratitude. Instead, he casually implied that a reward should not be half-hearted. If he was being compensated, there was no reason he could not receive both the treasure and the access. Balza rejected the notion immediately. Only one choice would be permitted. With that declaration, he dismissed them. Zeke did not move. He raised a hand, clearly unwilling to let the matter end there. Freya nearly lost her composure. Acting quickly, she seized Zeke and forced a polite expression, offering apologies and gratitude on his behalf before dragging him toward the exit. As they were pulled away, Zeke delivered one final remark. He stated that if Balza continued suppressing his emotions as rigidly as he did, he would never grow stronger, regardless of the techniques he mastered or the power he possessed. The words struck Balza like a physical blow. Fury surged within him, and his dragon aura erupted once more, but it lasted only an instant. Zeke's own divine dragon aura surged forth and crushed it effortlessly. Freya shook violently, begging Zeke to stop as she dragged him through the doorway. She slammed the doors shut behind them. The moment Freya and Zeke exited the main hall, her composure shattered. She turned on him immediately, barely able to contain her frustration. Despite all her warnings, Zeke had shown blatant insolence toward the Masterhead. His behavior defied every rule of hierarchy the Eldragon family upheld. Zeke, however, appeared genuinely confused. From his perspective, he had already exercised restraint. That claim nearly made Freya lose her balance. She could not comprehend how he could show courtesy toward instructors and elders, yet treat the head of the entire family with such disregard. Zeke's reasoning was simple. Balza Eldragon was his father. Naturally, he spoke to him differently. Freya found herself without a rebuttal. Faced with his overwhelming strength and abnormal temperament, she could only mutter that he was clearly no ordinary child. Curiosity eventually overcame her restraint, and she questioned who he truly was. Zeke answered as he always did. He was Zeke, nothing more, nothing less. Freya fell silent. Every child of the Eldragon lineage had been fed ancient dragon blood in infancy, yet none, absolutely none, had ever been able to stand unmoved before the aura of the Masterhead. Balza Eldragon possessed the authority of a dragon king, a superior existence even among ancient dragons. Zeke should have been crushed. Instead, he remained untouched. What kind of being could remain calm before a dragon king? The thought unsettled her deeply. Sensing her silence, Zeke casually checked whether something was wrong. Freya dismissed the concern outwardly, but inwardly she had already resolved to investigate Zeke's birth records thoroughly. Shifting the topic, she asked which reward he intended to choose. Once again, she explained his options. Access to the 2nd floor of the Dragon Hall or a single treasure from the Dragon Treasury. Only one. Zeke asked whether he could take both. Freya refused immediately. After a brief pause, Zeke chose the Dragon Hall. To him, knowledge outweighed material gain. He needed to understand the era he had been reborn into, its tools, its medicine, its martial evolution, and the 1,000 years of history he had missed. At that moment, Langus arrived, merely stumbling with excitement. The idea of entering the Dragon Hall of the Eldragon family felt unreal to him. When Zeke observed his reaction, Langus nodded enthusiastically. The techniques he already possessed, strike dragon combat arts and nurturing dragon spear arts, were formidable. but the chance to learn higher-level martial knowledge felt like a dream. Soon after, Leica rushed in, brimming with anticipation. She spoke eagerly about maximizing every moment inside the Dragon Hall, determined to absorb as much knowledge as possible. She confirmed that although entry was limited to the first floor, the rules mirrored those of higher levels. Each person could borrow only one book, but they were free to read as many as time allowed. Efficient use of time would be crucial. Zeke acknowledged this calmly. Leica questioned why he had chosen the Dragon Hall instead of the Dragon Treasury, expecting him to prefer powerful artifacts. Zeke admitted the temptation but reiterated that knowledge held greater value to him at present. Leica explained that the second floor contained far rarer martial texts, with an enormous gap in quality between floors. Even so, she confidently declared that nothing surpassed her lightning great sword technique. Zeke did not respond. His attention had already shifted to the towering structure ahead, the Dragon Hall. When they arrived, the Guardian announced their allotted time, 5 hours, and reminded them to maintain silence inside. Zeke briefly wondered whether 5 hours would be sufficient, but Leica assured him that most were granted far less time. She emphasized that the first priority was choosing which book to borrow, followed by reading as many texts as possible. Langus mentioned rumors of prodigies capable of reading multiple books simultaneously. His own goal, however, was simple: to find a martial art that truly suited him. Inside the Dragon Hall, the scale of the archive became immediately apparent. Langus and Selena stared around in awe, overwhelmed by the mythical repository they had only heard about in stories. Endless shelves of ancient manuscripts and scrolls stretched beyond sight. Zeke scanned the collection carefully. There were far more texts than he had anticipated. A slow smile formed. Perhaps even he would find knowledge here that he had never encountered before. Hours passed. Zeke sat surrounded by towering stacks of manuscripts, the weight of history pressing down from every direction. The text revealed a past he had never imagined. Dimensional rifts, alien realms, and powers that shattered everything he once understood. Eventually, even Zeke reached his limit. He leaned back, exhaling slowly as the enormity of the knowledge settled into him. Nearly 1,000 years of history had passed beyond his awareness. Wars, evolution, catastrophes. One record stood out above the rest. Nearly 900 years ago, this world had connected to the otherworldly place known as the Chaos Realm. A tear in the dimensional barrier had altered humanity's fate forever. In that other world, monsters known as Chaos roamed freely. To resist the chaos, the people of that world awakened a special source power within themselves. The Eldragon family stood at the forefront of that struggle, fighting alongside them. Through bonds forged on the battlefield, 4 legendary warriors from the Chaos Realm, Typhona, Levius, Bahamut, and Fafnald, married into the Eldragon family. From their union arose the 4 great Eldragon branches, which continue to rule the world to this day. Memories stirred of the black boar he had encountered earlier, a creature wrapped in an unnatural mist that defied every natural principle he understood. At the time it had felt foreign, fundamentally wrong. Now after reading these records, the truth became clear. That aura had not originated from this world. The black mist had not been elemental, nor spiritual. It was chaos itself. His thoughts shifted again, recalling Leica's lightning aura. It had always felt unstable, resonating in a way unlike martial force or spiritual techniques. Even that inconsistency now made sense. Their power did not belong to this realm alone. It had been influenced by something far beyond it. Yet what fascinated him most was the mention of magic. Magic was described as a completely separate system, a form of power introduced through the Chaos Realm, a new technology, a foreign structure, unlike anything this world had previously possessed. Driven by curiosity, Zeke searched the shelves for instructional tomes related to this system. When he reached the expected section, his brow furrowed. The space beside the historical records was empty. Something this significant should have been stored there, but it was gone. Before he could continue investigating, a faint whisper drifted through the silent Dragon Hall. Zeke stiffened instantly. There was no detectable presence, only a voice. He turned sharply, scanning the aisles, yet found nothing. Sitting among open books, he assessed the situation calmly. Whatever this was, it was not manipulating power in any way he recognized. Then something changed. A single book near him began turning its pages on its own. Moments later, every book stacked around him lifted into the air. As the books floated higher, faint shimmering lines revealed themselves, barely visible threads glistening in the air. Someone was manipulating the books using thread-like control. The technique was so elegant that Zeke momentarily forgot his surroundings. When the unseen presence warned again for silence, Zeke ignored it entirely. He seized the last floating book and followed the path of the threads with open curiosity, tugging against the unseen force. High above, seated casually on an upper balcony, a hooded figure controlled dozens of floating tomes with subtle finger movements. Without even looking down, the figure flicked a wrist. Cold pressure wrapped around Zeke in an instant. Before he could fully react, The Dragon Hall Guardian's voice echoed through the chamber, announcing the end of the allotted time. In the same fluid motion, the threads tightened, and Zeke was launched out of the hall. He twisted mid-air, stabilized himself, and landed effortlessly outside the structure. He glanced back at the towering Dragon Hall, eyes gleaming with interest. Whatever had just occurred only deepened his desire to return. Behind him, Laika and Longus stood frozen, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Zeke brushed the dust from his clothes calmly, offering no real explanation beyond his own excitement. To redirect the moment, Zeke observed the other's gains. Langus revealed a spear technique, focused on fluid movement. Selena had acquired a refined sword art, emphasizing agility. Raymond had obtained a shield technique designed to reinforce defensive stability. Zeke acknowledged their progress, quietly noting that all three techniques traced back to martial foundations he himself had created long ago. When Laika presented her own text, a great sword art refined by a later family head, Zeke's gaze sharpened slightly. Once again, the same hand that had refined his earlier techniques had left its mark. Amused and intrigued, Zeke looked back toward the Dragon Hall. What he once assumed would be dull had become a treasure trove of unanswered questions. This is how 5 years passed. Within the Eastern Hall of Academy, Laika moved swiftly, scanning her surroundings. She had already searched the dormitories, yet there was no sign of Zeke or the others. A passing student informed her that the group had gone to the training grounds. The revelation unsettled her. They had already trained before sunrise. Why return again? Unease tightened in her chest as she hurried toward the grounds. The moment she stepped through the gates, she froze. Selena stood ahead with her sword drawn, stance sharp and focused. Beside her, Raymond held his shield firmly, prepared to withstand impact. Behind them, Langus spun his spear with refined precision. At the center of them all stood Zeke, unarmed. He faced all three without hesitation. It was clear from the way he stood that he intended to confront them all at once. The scene transitioned to the private office of Balsa Eldragon. Balsa reviewed a thick stack of documents in silence. After a prolonged moment, he set the papers aside and lifted his gaze, inquiring whether the intelligence had been fully confirmed. Standing before him was Achan, captain of the Black Dragon Corps. His posture remained rigid, his expression unreadable. Achan reported that the investigation had verified the phenomenon. Spatial distortions and mana readings strongly suggested the emergence of a special rift, with an estimated 80% probability that a magic tower existed within it. Balsa released a slow breath. Of all possible outcomes, the rift had appeared in the most problematic location imaginable: magic water, a substance capable of transforming ordinary humans into mages. Those who consumed it developed a rare constitution that allowed source power to be converted into mana, giving birth to entirely new systems of combat, unfamiliar techniques, and revolutionary methods of warfare. Since its discovery, civilization itself had been reshaped. But progress came with bloodshed. Endless territorial conflicts erupted over ownership of magic springs, and in this era, the number of mages a house possessed had become the foundation of military dominance. Yet within Eldragon territory, not a single magic spring existed. For a house without access to a spring, there was only one method of acquisition: special rift conquest. At present, the Eldragon family possessed only a handful of mages, Balsa included. Every one of them was a hardened survivor of previous rift incursions. Even so, their numbers were dangerously low. Compared to rival great houses that controlled multiple magic springs, Eldragon was being slowly cornered through sheer numerical disparity. That reality was why special rift conquest had become Eldragon's highest priority operation. Achan then presented the secondary complication. As expected, the rift's location threatened immediate conflict. It had formed within the abundant dragon forest, an ancient woodland largely under Eldragon jurisdiction. However, a significant portion of the forest overlapped with territory claimed by another great house, the Kerberos family, who aggressively asserted ownership and openly referred to the region as the Great Abandoned Forest. Achan spread a detailed map across the desk, marked with terrain layers, mana flow anomalies, and spatial distortions. He pointed to the glowing epicenter, confirming that the rift itself lay within Eldragon territory. However, due to its immense scale and unstable nature, the spatial domain it generated would inevitably expand beyond fixed borders. The projected influence zone extended dangerously close to Kerberos lands. Given the Kerberos family's temperament, Achan assessed the probability of interference as extremely high. Balsa remained unmoved. Noise and aggression had always been Kerberos's defining traits. Still, he did not underestimate the threat. Once the rift's existence became known, conflict would be unavoidable, and while spatial rifts imposed severe restrictions, limiting movement, coordination, and large-scale deployment, waiting would only invite disaster. If Eldragon hesitated, Kerberos would act first. That outcome was unacceptable. Without delay, Balsa issued his command. All dragon nests under Eldragon authority were to be alerted immediately. Preparations were to begin at once. A selection examination would be held to determine who was worthy of entering the rift. This would not be a contest of talent alone, but a test of survival itself. The scene shifted back to the academy training grounds. Laika stood facing Zeke, her demeanor uncharacteristically serious. Across from her, Zeke appeared entirely at ease, his posture relaxed, his presence steady. Without warning, Langus, Selena, and Raymond moved simultaneously. Their auras surged as they attacked from 3 directions, each strike carrying full intent. The moment their power flared, Zeke's gaze sharpened. He stepped forward, his movements fluid and precise, intercepting each assault with effortless control, as if they carried no weight at all. The combined assault ended before it truly began. Zeke lowered his arms and calmly assessed them. Langus's spear technique was powerful but overly forced, disrupting the natural flow of his movements. Selena's speed and strike frequency were impressive, yet her attacks lacked sufficient weight and grounding. Raymond's shield control, however, was acknowledged as stable and steadily improving. With a faint smile, Zeke pointed out that all 3 of them were still far too passive. He explained that hesitation had no place in real combat and urged them to attack him again without restraint. Watching from behind, Laika muttered that the entire scene was absurd. Zeke glanced back at her and questioned whether she truly believed that. Laika responded sharply, stating that allowing oneself to be struck bare-bodied without circulating source power was absolute madness. Despite her words, Zeke continued slipping effortlessly through their renewed attacks, dodging and countering with casual precision as if their strikes carried no threat at all. To him, this was exactly what proper training looked like. He raised his arm confidently and remarked that his body alone had grown sturdy enough to withstand their blows even without source power. He questioned whether she genuinely could not see that. Laika let out a long sigh, placing a hand on her forehead, saying that at the very least he should stop letting them attack him while he was talking. Even as they continued striking him, Langus muttered that Zeke was completely insane. Laika shook her head and added that, in her opinion, all of them were just as strange for continuing to attack him, as if their efforts were not entirely meaningless. Raymond, still pressing forward, wondered how Zeke could possess such overwhelming defense without using source power. Selena added that it went far beyond what should be possible for a human body. Laika cut them off, stating flatly that Zeke should not be compared to humans at all. She reminded them that the seniors had long referred to him as the demon child of the Eastern Hall. Zeke glanced at her with mild offense and questioned whether that was meant to be an insult. As the training session continued, Zeke turned toward Laika and asked whether she had come merely to watch, or if she planned to join them. Laika replied that the training itself was fine, but there was something important she needed to say first. She informed him that it appeared they would soon be encountering children from other dragon nests, and much sooner than expected. Langus froze in shock. Raymond admitted that he had always expected something like this to happen eventually. Selena asked whether it was related to the next test. Laika said she did not know the details, but the signs were obvious. The instructor's behavior, their movements, and their sudden changes in attitude all pointed toward an imminent clash. Zeke considered this briefly and realized he had never paid attention to such subtleties before. With a serious expression, Laika warned him to be careful, mentioning that the Western Hall had another candidate for the next family head, someone genuinely dangerous. Zeke's smile widened slightly. To him, things were finally starting to sound interesting. Several days later, the Eastern Hall training grounds were packed with students. Juniors stood nervously under the oppressive atmosphere, while seniors remained calm and imposing, their presence alone overwhelming the weaker students. Zeke and his group stood together, quietly observing. Zeke noted that everyone had been gathered into the arena without regard for rank. Laika nodded, stating that this was exactly what she had expected. Without warning, the gates of the training grounds swung open. All chatter died instantly as if Freya stepped inside. Her presence alone silenced the area. She announced that in 3 days, the students of the Eastern Hall would be facing the children of the other dragon nests. Shock rippled through the crowd. Panic spread among the juniors. Raymond frowned deeply. Selena fell silent. Langus stiffened, clearly unsettled, and Zeke smiled for the first time in a long while, genuine excitement stirring within him. Freya raised 3 fingers and reiterated the announcement. In exactly 3 days, every student present would face the children of the other dragon nests. Battles between dragon nests were traditionally reserved for graduation examinations, after students had proven themselves. To announce one so suddenly left many stunned, unable to grasp why it was happening now. Freya allowed the confusion to linger briefly before continuing. She stated that there was a reason behind the decision, though she could not reveal the details. However, she promised one thing with certainty. Those who emerged victorious would be entrusted with a special mission. Zeke's eyes gleamed faintly. He did not ask what the mission was. Anything described as special within the academy inevitably involved danger, conflict, and growth. To him, it sounded far too interesting to ignore. Freya then explained the structure of the event. The tournament would follow an elimination format. Each of the 4 dragon nests would send 7 representatives. The Eastern Hall would select its 7 representatives that very day. A senior student stepped forward confidently, questioning whether the representatives would naturally be chosen from among the seniors. Freya calmly asked why she would summon every student regardless of rank if that were the case. Her implication was clear. The representatives would be chosen from all years, seniors and juniors alike. That declaration immediately stirred unrest. Several senior students scoffed openly, questioning what juniors could possibly contribute in a battle of this scale. Their dismissive gazes pressed down on the younger students. Before leaving, Ifreya stated clearly that she didn't care how, it was mandatory that the 7 students be selected today. Then, a senior student strode forward with clear authority. It was Rick, one of the strongest seniors of the Eastern Nest. He turned toward the gathered juniors, his voice sharp as he declared that the 7 representatives for the tournament would naturally be chosen from among the seniors. With an arrogant sweep of his gaze, he asked if anyone had any objections. For a brief moment, silence followed. Then a single figure stepped forward from the junior ranks. It was Laika. She stated calmly that she did in fact have a complaint. According to her, there was no reason the 7 participants should be limited to seniors alone. She added that juniors, herself included, were more than qualified to compete. Rick's jaw tightened as he muttered her name under his breath. Regaining his composure, he replied coolly that Lady Laika must be misunderstanding the situation. This was not a matter of noble lineage or status, he said, but one of pure combat skill. In a head-to-head battle, experience and strength mattered above all else. Before Rick could finish his sentence, Laika released her mana. The air shifted. 3 brilliant stars manifested on her chest, shining unmistakably. Laika calmly asked whether someone with 3 stars still lacked the necessary skill. The seniors stared in disbelief. Rick's eyes widened slightly, his confidence cracking. Someone among the seniors muttered under their breath, questioning when a 3-star junior had even appeared. Then Laika continued. She agreed that participants should be chosen by strength, but asked a simple question in return. Were there truly 7 seniors stronger than her? She demanded an answer. And if there were not, she argued, then the selection must include freshmen as well. Rick clenched his teeth and responded that Laika was an exception, a special case. Raising his voice, he insisted that no other junior could ever surpass the seniors. That was when another voice cut in, remarking casually that Rick was being far too loud. Rick turned sharply, irritated, asking what he had just said. It was Zeke. He repeated calmly that Rick was shouting unnecessarily. Then, with an almost amused expression, Zeke stated that the seniors clearly believed all juniors were weak and insignificant. As he spoke, Zeke released his aura, not explosively, but with terrifying pressure that rolled across the field. Smiling faintly, Zeke proposed something simple. Instead of arguing, they should fight. From now on, everyone who wished to participate should battle freely until only 7 remained standing. Laika pinched the bridge of her nose, murmuring that things were escalating far too quickly. She knew how dangerous this could become. Still, she forced herself to step in before chaos fully erupted. She clarified her proposal, a ranking battle. Anyone who wished to participate would enter. Over the next 3 days, their results would be recorded, and rankings determined objectively. Those who placed within the top 7 would represent the Eastern Nest. Seeing no better alternative, and unwilling to back down publicly, Rick reluctantly approved the proposal, dismissing it as a waste of time. He was convinced the outcome was already decided. Laika turned back toward Zeke and asked whether he intended to participate in the qualification battles as well. Zeke's eyes lit up immediately. Without hesitation, he answered that of course he would. Then, turning slightly, he looked toward Langus, Selena, and Raymond, calmly stating that they would be participating too. Langus stiffened in shock, asking if Zeke truly meant they were going to fight senior students head-on. Zeke confirmed it without the slightest doubt. He reminded them of the relentless training they had endured together, pushing far beyond their limits. He asked them what they planned to do if they did not prove their results here. Selena let out a quiet breath, admitting the pressure was overwhelming, but running away would only prove the seniors right. Raymond followed, stating that if this was happening, then he would give it everything he had. No excuses. No holding back. Naturally, the 3 took their places beside Zeke, forming their familiar lineup. Seeing this, Laika turned toward the other junior students and asked if anyone else wished to join the qualification battles. The response was hesitant. Some juniors murmured among themselves, pointing out that even if Laika and Zeke were confident, their opponents were still seniors, many with 3-star ranks. To them, victory seemed impossible. Zeke listened in silence before muttering that he could not understand why everyone was already so demoralized. He stated that there was far more to gain from fighting a superior opponent than avoiding them. Even defeat carried value, experience, insight, and growth that could never be gained by standing still. After a brief pause, he added that it no longer mattered. The moment had already come. As Zeke, Laika, and the juniors who stepped forward stood ready, Zeke glanced toward the seniors with a faint, confident smile. Quietly, he remarked that it was finally time to see what the senior students were truly capable of. Rick shouted angrily at his fellow seniors, declaring that these juniors had become a complete nuisance. He sneered that no matter how hard they struggled, there was no possible way they could win against seniors, reminding everyone of the obvious gap in experience and rank. Several senior students laughed among themselves, mocking the juniors. One remarked casually that there was no need to go all out, and that they should treat the juniors gently. Another scoffed, stating that aside from Lady Laika, every junior present was only 1-star warrior. Sensing the unease spreading among his teammates, Zeke calmly asked what was wrong and why they looked so worried. Langus admitted the truth. He said that their opponents were seniors, 3-star students, and that it was only natural to feel nervous facing people with such an advantage. Zeke responded without hesitation. He reminded them that they had trained together relentlessly. He pointed out that they had already proven their strength time and time again during training. More importantly, he told them that they needed to believe in themselves. His words carried weight. After hearing Zeke's calm reassurance, Selena's tense expression softened into a smile, and Langus let out a quiet sigh of relief. The fear that had been gripping them loosened, replaced by renewed confidence. Across the field, Rick grew impatient. He shouted again, ordering the juniors to release their aura and stop wasting time. He barked that they did not have all day to listen to pointless chatter, and demanded that Zeke step forward and face them at once. The battle began. From the sidelines, the other juniors watched in disbelief. They could barely comprehend what was unfolding before their eyes. One by one, senior students fell. Langus and Selena stood victorious over their defeated opponents, while murmurs spread rapidly through the crowd. Junior students whispered among themselves, questioning what they were witnessing. Some wondered whether the seniors of this year were unusually weak, while others questioned if the juniors were monstrously strong. Standing calmly to the side, Zeke wore a wide, satisfied smile. He praised everyone sincerely, saying they had done an excellent job. He noted that Langus had greatly improved his deflection techniques and had developed a sharper instinct for detecting openings in battle. Turning to Selena, he remarked that she had mastered the multiple movements of the Windflower sword technique far better than before. As for Raymond, Zeke acknowledged his growth in strategy and deception, praising how effectively he used his shield depending on the situation. Zeke reflected quietly that all of their training had finally borne fruit. He hoped they would continue to build confidence, not just in practice but in real combat. Leica had proven her strength as well. She defeated her senior opponent decisively, bringing him down with a single overwhelming surge of lightning energy. The sight left the remaining seniors in complete disbelief. They struggled to accept that juniors 2-star students had defeated them so thoroughly. Standing over her fallen opponent, Leica questioned sharply whether this still was not enough. Rick's voice echoed across the training ground as he shouted that it was impossible, absolutely impossible for 3-star seniors to lose to 2-star juniors. His expression twisted with panic the moment Zeke stepped forward into his field of view. Despite everything he had just witnessed, Rick scoffed loudly, calling Zeke naive and insisting that these results meant nothing. Zeke responded by calmly releasing his mana. A powerful aura surged outward from his body, pressing down on the surroundings like an invisible weight. His voice remained composed as he addressed Rick directly. Zeke pointed out that Rick was obsessed with age, rank, and the number of stars, treating them as absolute truths. He stated that those things were nothing more than indicators, useful for reference but meaningless in real combat. Zeke continued, explaining that true strength was decided by only one thing: victory. If someone was weak, they lost. If they were strong, they won. It was that simple. Rick snapped back angrily, shouting that Zeke was an idiot. He insisted that the number of stars directly represented power, and demanded to know whether Zeke truly lacked even such basic knowledge. Zeke merely smiled. He calmly asked Rick a single question: whether someone had stars or not. If their heart was destroyed, would they live or die? Rick froze. Zeke continued, telling him not to ignore the true essence of strength. Combat was not measured by titles, age, or stars, but by a single outcome, whether one could win or not. Rick's panic turned into rage. He shouted, demanding to know what nonsense Zeke was spouting. He reminded Zeke that he was a senior, and declared that excuses like these would never work on him. He claimed he had been lenient only because Zeke was a child, but that it was now too late for regrets or tears. Zeke's expression did not change. As if bored, he asked whether Rick had finished with the verbal sparring. He remarked that children should act like children by moving their bodies instead of talking endlessly. Then calmly, he narrowed the situation down to what truly mattered. It was now just the two of them. Zeke asked what kind of martial art Rick had mastered. As his aura expanded further, Zeke invited him to show how much he had truly trained. Rick roared in response. He leapt into the air, his mana blazing violently as he displayed the full extent of his training and pride. His aura flared brilliantly as he descended toward Zeke, determined to prove his superiority. Before Rick could even complete his attack, Zeke moved. A single punch struck Rick squarely in the mouth. The impact shattered everything. Rick's body was sent flying sideways, crashing into the ground with brutal force. His pride, confidence, and authority collapsed in an instant. Zeke stood calmly over him, a bright smile on his face. He commented lightly that Rick had trained well. Leica muttered in disbelief that Zeke had defeated Rick before he could even demonstrate the results of his training. The juniors standing nearby silently agreed. The scene shifted to the West Dragon Hall training camp. The ground was littered with defeated students. Dozens lay sprawled across the training field, groaning or completely unconscious, their weapons scattered and their pride shattered. At the center of it all, one student sat casually atop a fallen opponent's back. In his hand he loosely gripped a dagger that still glowed faintly with mana. His name was Vanille, from the Fafnil branch of the Eldragon family, and one of the head candidates of the family. He looked around at the defeated students with clear disinterest and muttered that none of them were worth his time. Moments later, His subordinates approached from behind. One of them reported that the situation on their side had been fully concluded. Behind her stood the selected students who would represent the West Dragon Nest in the upcoming tournament. Among them was Retin, the same student seen during the entrance examination. Veniel's eyes shifted toward him. He clicked his tongue lightly and remarked that Retin was still a novice. However, his gaze lingered when he sensed the aura surrounding him. 3 stars. At that realization, Retin stiffened in panic and hurriedly addressed Veniel with respect, calling him head. Veniel's lips curved into a faint smile. He remarked that this was good, very good. He stated that he liked talented individuals, and added casually that if Retin proved useful, he would consider taking him on as a subordinate. Without hesitation, Retin bowed deeply. Veniel did not even bother standing as he accepted the gesture, still seated atop the defeated student beneath him. Inwardly, Retin's heart raced. Someone of such overwhelming power had acknowledged his worth. As long as Veniel stood on their side, the West Dragon Nest would never lose. The prestigious special mission would be theirs without question. Retin was certain that Veniel would become the next head of the Eldragon family. And when that happened, being one of his direct subordinates would place Retin far above the rest. The thought alone made his lips curl into a subtle, sinister smile. At that moment, one of Veniel's subordinates stepped forward again, her expression cautious. She informed him that there was something important he needed to know. Unbothered, Veniel asked what it was. She leaned closer and whispered that Lady Laika would be joining the team selected by the East Dragon Nest. Veniel's expression darkened instantly. He clicked his tongue and ran a hand through his hair, irritation flashing across his face. He muttered that this was going to be troublesome. Then he finally rose to his feet. With cold confidence, he stated that it did not matter how talented she was. Victory was already decided. The West Dragon Nest would win, complete the special mission, and prove their superiority beyond doubt. His gaze sharpened as he declared that he would show all of his siblings exactly what he was worth. The position of the next head of the Eldragon family, he declared, would belong to him. The selection tournament had finally arrived. Around the vast arena, the chosen students from all 4 dragon nests were seated in groups, while the surrounding seats buzzed with noise as students exchanged glances, whispers, and tense conversations. The atmosphere was heavy, part excitement, part pressure. Langid stiffened as he looked around. His shoulders tightened as he quietly remarked to Laika that far more people were present than he had expected. Laika glanced around calmly and explained that it was only natural. Students had come from every dragon nest to witness the tournament. Then, narrowing her eyes slightly, she added that many familiar faces were missing, those who had been eliminated during the selection exams. "Doesn't the number feel unusually small?" she asked. The realization struck Langus all at once. Those who had been eliminated weren't simply absent. They were no longer acknowledged. They were the so-called fake dragons, just like his father. Langus's breathing grew shallow as his hands trembled. Laika noticed immediately. Without saying a word, she reached out and lightly tapped his back. She reminded him that regardless of who had fallen away, they were here. They had grown strong enough to be chosen as representatives of the Eastern Dragon Nest. That alone was proof of their worth. Langus swallowed hard, then nodded. He stated firmly that he would give everything he had in the coming battles. Behind them, Zeke stood quietly, his gaze sweeping across the arena. Laika turned and smiled at him, noting how strangely calm he looked. Given the magnitude of the tournament, she found his composure unsettling. Zeke responded evenly that there was nothing special about it. He was simply observing the other students and evaluating their combat capabilities. Langus immediately collapsed to the ground in shock. Laika sighed beside him, muttering that it was exactly what she had expected from Zeke. Only someone like him would treat a selection tournament as a live battlefield analysis. As Zeke continued observing the arena, 2 familiar figures approached from the side. They were senior students from the Eastern Dragon Nest, Aaron and Rick, both selected among the 7 representatives. Zeke noted quietly that they had changed significantly since their last encounter. Rick acknowledged it without hesitation. He admitted that his previous defeat had forced him to rethink everything. Since then, he had trained seriously, no longer relying on status or seniority. He declared that as a member of the Eldragon lineage, he respected strength above all else, and to him the truly strong were Laika and Zeke. Zeke paused briefly, then replied calmly that as long as Rick understood that strength carried responsibility, there was nothing wrong with that. Turning his attention back to the arena, Zeke silently analyzed the participants. Every student present except those from the Eastern Dragon Nest was a confirmed 3-star combatant. Yet something stood out. There were no 4-star students. Still, among the crowd, Zeke identified 3 individuals whose presence felt different. Fighters standing dangerously close to the threshold of a 4th star. Zeke's lips curved slightly. He wondered what kind of battles awaited him in this tournament. As Laika continued speaking with Langus and the others, a sudden presence closed in from behind. Someone wrapped arms around her shoulders with an easy smile, startling her mid-sentence. Laika stiffened in surprise. Standing nearby, Zeke observed the situation calmly. quietly wondering what was happening. The girl who had grabbed Laika leaned closer, speaking in a familiar, teasing manner. She remarked that it had been a long time and asked how Laika had been doing. With a playful glance around, she added that she hoped no one had been harassing her. Laika quickly reassured her that everything was fine and that there was no need for concern. From behind them, Langus spoke up cautiously, asking who the girl was. Laika hesitated for a moment, then muttered that the girl was her cousin. She formally introduced her as Sandy Typhon, the daughter of the head of the Typhona family. The name alone sent a ripple of shock through Langus, Selena, and Raymond. The Typhona family was one of the 4 branch families of Eldragon family. Sandy tilted her head, studying the group with open curiosity. She asked Laika who these children were. Laika smiled gently and replied that they were her classmates and her friends. At the word friends, Sandy raised an eyebrow. She commented lightly that it was fine for Laika to make friends and get along with others, but then questioned whether they were truly suitable companions for someone destined to become a future family head. Without softening her words, she asked whether they weren't a bit too weak to stand beside a head candidate. Their expression immediately tightened. Panic and discomfort flashed across their faces. Before Laika could respond, Zeke stepped forward. He remarked that Sandy would understand soon enough when she actually fought with them. Sandy turned toward him, mildly surprised, and asked who he was. Laika introduced him, stating that his name was Zeke and that he was also a candidate for the position of future family head. Recognition flickered across Sandy's face. She asked with clear intrigue whether he was the rumored illegitimate son of the family head. Then she added that she had never expected a mere illegitimate child to still be alive. Zeke listened without reacting, a small unreadable smile forming on his face. Laika frowned sharply and demanded to know why Sandy was acting this way. Sandy replied casually that regardless of his status, Zeke was still Laika's rival. She went on to say that surrounding herself with friends, or whatever these children were, would only weaken Laika's chances against the other head candidates. She finished by pointing out that none of them were even 3-star students, asking bluntly whether the Eastern Dragon Nest standards had fallen that low. Zeke responded calmly, his tone even and composed. He stated that if Sandy continued to underestimate them like this, she would soon find herself being caught off guard. Sandy's expression shifted instantly. Her eyes narrowed as she turned fully toward Zeke, demanding to know what he had just said. She coldly reminded him that he was nothing more than a bastard, someone without a supporting family or backing of his own. The only thing he possessed, she claimed, was the blood of the family head, and nothing more. Stepping closer, Sandy confronted him openly. With a sharp, provocative gesture, she pointed a finger at him and asked whether he truly dared to speak so casually in front of her. Zeke remained calm. He replied evenly that it had merely been a piece of advice. That response only pushed Sandy closer to the edge. Her expression twisted with irritation as she began to release her aura. Before she could act, a figure stepped between them. The sudden interruption forced Sandy to stop. The boy who had intervened was Edges Vanblade, the representative of the North Dragon Nest. With a composed posture, he placed himself squarely between Sandy and Zeke, reminding her that this was not the place to cause trouble for other teams. Edges briefly glanced at Zeke. Despite standing before 2 powerful representatives, Zeke's expression remained unchanged, as if the tension meant nothing to him. Sandy clicked her tongue and told Edges to move aside, insisting that she was in the middle of something important. Edges responded with a relaxed smile, stating that he could not simply ignore the situation, especially with the selection tournament about to begin. Around the arena, students from all dragon nests were chatting, whispering, then a commanding voice cut through the noise. At the sound alone, the entire arena fell silent. Langus. Everyone froze. The man who had spoken stepped forward and announced that the long-awaited selection tournament was finally about to begin. Hearing those words, Zeke's lips curved slightly into a confident smile. The man standing before them was Teach Mentric, the captain of the Gold Dragon Corps, a figure infamous throughout the academy as an intimidating educator. Mentric then stepped forward and raised his voice, drawing everyone's attention. He announced that the selection battle was about to begin. He explained that the match would follow a tournament-style elimination format, combining all 4 halls. First, the 4 halls would be split into 2 groups, and the winners of those groups would then face each other in the finals. The battle format would consist strictly of one-on-one duels. Each hall would send out 1 fighter at a time, following a predetermined order decided before the matches began. From the 7 participants of each pavilion, the side that managed to defeat 4 opponents first would be declared the winner, while the remaining results would determine first and second place accordingly. He emphasized an important rule. Once the match began, changing the fighting order was strictly prohibited. The chosen order itself was to be considered part of each hall's overall strategy. Then, Mentric delivered the final point. Those selected through this tournament would be assigned a special mission. At the mention of a special mission, Zeke's smile subtly widened. Among all things, missions were the only thing that truly stirred his interest. Mentric continued, stating that this special mission was extremely important to the Eldragon family. Anyone who took part in it would be making a significant contribution to the family. Hearing this, Laika's expression hardened with determination. At the same time, a confident smile appeared on Veniel's face. Both of them understood the implication clearly. Contributing to the Eldragon family through such a mission meant taking a major step closer to the seat of family head. With that, Mentric ordered everyone to begin determining the brackets. He instructed each hall's representative to come forward, one by one, and draw a stone from the box to decide the matchups. When Mentric called for the West Hall representative, Veniel Fafnald stepped forward without hesitation. He calmly reached into the box and drew a stone. After glancing at it, Mentric nodded and told him to return to his position. Seeing Vinel up close, Laika stiffened slightly. Vinel glanced in her direction, a sinister smile curling at the corner of his lips. Noticing her reaction, Zeke quietly asked whether she knew him. Laika answered in a low voice that this was the West Hall representative she had mentioned earlier, Veniel Fafnald, one of the leading head candidates of the Eldragon family. Hearing the name, Zeke smiled faintly. Looking at the West Hall's lineup, he noted inwardly that it wasn't just Veniel. Overall, the West Hall was filled with strong fighters. The other halls were clearly well-trained too, but the difference in power was palpable. The gap between the West Hall and the others could be felt by everyone present. Then Zeke's gaze landed on a familiar face among Veniel's group. Red team. Zeke muttered inwardly that it had been a while since he had seen that face. He recalled the entrance exam and acknowledged that Retin had shown considerable skill back then. Reaching 3 stars at this age meant Retin must have trained relentlessly, something Zeke found genuinely impressive. Meanwhile, standing with the West Hall team, Retin noticed Langus. His teeth clenched. He couldn't understand why Langus was here. Some of Retin's subordinates, sitting among the students, openly scoffed. They loudly mocked Langus, unable to believe that a so-called dropout like him had made it this far. Hearing this, Langus tensed up. Raymond, standing beside him, asked quietly whether he was all right. Langus replied that he was fine, but he could clearly feel it. Retin's gaze fixed directly on him, radiated pressure. Mentric then called out for the North Hall representative. At his signal, Edge's Vanblade stepped forward. As he reached into the box, Mentric shouted for the South Hall representative. A purple-haired girl walked out confidently. She selected her stone and stepped back into position. Finally, Mentric called for the East Hall representative. Without hesitation, Laika turned to Zeke and told him to go. Zeke froze for a brief moment and asked why he was the one being sent. Laika answered plainly that it was obvious he was the strongest among them. Zeke attempted to object, stating that in tournaments like this, the younger ones usually took center stage. Laika stared at him in confusion and reminded him that they were all the same age, then firmly instructed him to stop overthinking and go. Sandy shouted toward Laika, demanding to know why an illegitimate child was being sent instead of her. Laika replied without hesitation that it was because Zeke was the strongest member of the East Hall. Sandy immediately rejected the claim, stating that it couldn't be true. She pointed out that Zeke wasn't even a 3-star, and insisted that this selection tournament was supposed to be a battle between head candidates, Veniel and Laika. Before Sandy could continue, Laika cut her off. She calmly stated that the East Hall was fine as it was. A faint smile appeared on her face, one that showed absolute confidence in her group's strength. Once all representatives had drawn their stones, Mentric ordered them to channel their source power into the stones. As each representative complied, the stones began to glow. The result became immediately clear. Mentric announced that this would determine the brackets. The first match would be East Hall versus North Hall. The second match would be West Hall versus South Hall. The members of the North Hall was ready for battle ahead. Among them stood Sandy, and beside her, a large muscular man whose presence alone radiated pressure. Seeing him, Langus stiffened and quietly asked Laika whether that person was really a student. Laika confirmed that he was. However, her expression showed hesitation. She clearly hadn't expected to face her cousin Sandy in the very first match. Sandy, on the other hand, released her aura openly. She thought this was the perfect opportunity, a chance to wake Laika up. She declared loudly that she would crush Laika completely, so that Laika would finally remember her position and her purpose. In response, Laika released her own aura, her eyes sharp and unwavering as she prepared for battle. Nearby, Edges glanced at Zeke with interest and remarked that he was genuinely looking forward to their match. Zeke replied with a relaxed smile, saying that it seemed they would get along just fine, and that he too was looking forward to it. As the two of them stood side by side, identical stones glowing in their hands, Zeke's smile widened slightly. He truly couldn't wait for the battle ahead. Veniel sat calmly among the students, observing the arena with a detached expression. Not far from him, the South Hall representative and her team were also watching in silence, carefully studying the movements and reactions of the other halls. Soon the announcement echoed through the arena. The first match of the selection tournament would be East Hall versus North Hall. Both halls stiffened as the news spread. Each side began preparing to send out their first representative. Rick clenched his fists tightly. With a tense expression, he muttered that he had to win this battle no matter what. Leica glanced at him with concern before quietly asking Zeke whether Rick would be all right. She pointed out that he looked extremely nervous. Zeke nodded slightly, acknowledging her concern. Instructor Mentrick then raised his hand and announced for both sides' warriors to step forward. The arena fell silent as Rick moved into position, facing the North Hall's warrior across from him. With a firm gesture from Mentrick, the match officially began. Rick let out a loud roar as he gathered mana into his fist, determination burning in his eyes. Zeke calmly remarked that now they would see how things truly turned out. Leica replied that, judging by Rick's condition, the fight looked like it would be difficult. She asked Zeke whether he thought the same. Zeke answered evenly that there was no such thing as a guaranteed outcome in battle. His expression shifted slightly as he added almost casually that this rule did not apply to him. When he fought, victory was absolute. Leica immediately told him that she had not been talking about him. Ignoring that, Zeke continued analyzing the match. He stated that, in terms of pure skill, the North Hall fighter was not much different from Rick. As he leapt in the air, Zeke concluded that if Rick fought the way he usually did, he should have been able to win. Leica shook her head. She pointed out that this was their first time fighting in front of such a massive audience, and on top of that he was carrying the pressure of representing the East Hall. That kind of stress could easily affect performance. Zeke agreed that she had a point. However, he added that the same pressure applied to the opposing side as well. Then his gaze shifted slightly. He mentioned that Sandy and Edges were exceptions. Leica felt it too, the oppressive presence coming from those two. Zeke explained that both Sandy and Edges were already on the verge of reaching 4-star level, and fighters of that caliber would not be shaken easily by crowd pressure. Inwardly, Zeke noted that Sandy, being Leica's cousin, wielded techniques from the same lineage. When the time came, facing her would likely become an important learning experience for Leica. The sound of impact echoed across the arena. Rick was sent crashing to the ground. The first match ended with North Hall's victory. Rick lay defeated on the arena floor. Rin panicked as she watched the outcome and muttered that she had to win the second match. Leica told her not to be too nervous, assuring her that she would be fine. However, despite the encouragement, the second match ended the same way. North Hall claimed victory once again. Rick and Rin stepped forward, apologizing to Zeke for their defeat. Zeke only smiled calmly. He explained that they had simply been swept away by the intense atmosphere of the arena. They both agreed. Zeke reassured them not to dwell on it. He stated that if this had been a real battlefield, where life and death were decided in a single moment, the outcome would have been completely different. This place, he reminded them, was a learning ground. It was not a battlefield meant for killing. It was a place where warriors competed using their own skills. A place where failure could be experienced safely. Zeke firmly believed that bitter experiences like today's loss would one day become fuel on a real battlefield. He urged them to keep moving forward and continue training. Hearing his words, both Rick and Rin responded with strong determination. Zeke then pointed out that despite everything, the team had suffered 2 consecutive losses. That made the next match extremely important. His gaze shifted toward Langus. Turning to him with a cheerful expression, Zeke addressed Langus directly. Langus immediately panicked. He begged Zeke not to put any more pressure on him, admitting that he had been nervous since morning. His anxious rambling spilled out as he remarked that to make things worse, his opponent is the super terrifying senior from the other hall. Overcome with fear, Langus began crying and clung tightly to Zeke. Zeke calmly reminded him that he had already fought against that opponent when the teams were originally chosen. Langus, still shaking, insisted that there had been no one that frightening in the East Wing. The thought of defeating such a terrifying senior in front of so many people filled him with dread. Zeke let out a quiet sigh. He realized there was no choice but to encourage Langus in a different way. Laughing lightly, Zeke placed a hand on Langus's shoulder and pointed toward his opponent, telling him to look carefully. Langus stared ahead in confusion, not understanding what Zeke meant. Zeke calmly directed his attention to the opponent's weapon and asked Langus to think about what he was holding. A sword. Though Langus answered hesitantly, Zeke pushed the thought further until it became clear. He explained that the opponent was nothing more than a humanoid wielding a sword. Nothing else mattered. If the sword came forward, Langus should dodge. If it was raised to cut, he should retreat. If it lowered to strike, he should advance. Zeke instructed him to focus on responding exactly as he always did to a weapon called a sword. Nothing more was needed. Langus listened carefully. Slowly, confidence returned to his expression. He stated that he would act exactly as he always had. Seeing this, Zeke smiled inwardly. Langus possessed exceptional concentration. For now, he simply needed guidance to focus properly. Once he could achieve that naturally, Zeke believed Langus would rise to an even higher level. Nearby, several students began mocking Langus, pointing out the difference in physique and claiming that someone so weak could never become a ranker. Langus glared at them with deadly intensity. The ridicule stopped instantly. At that moment, Instructor Mentric announced the start of the match, shifting all attention back to the arena. The instant the battle began, Langus's opponent launched a sudden assault, activating the three-blade sword technique and executing a swift single-blade cut. The blade tore through the air, but Langus dodged cleanly. Enraged, the opponent shouted insults and pressed the attack, activating the technique once more, driving his assault even harder. Langus blocked the strike effortlessly, showing no trace of panic. Lika grew tense, worry tightening her expression. Langus's friends noticed that the opponent was closing the distance, exactly the range where Langus excelled, and anxiety spread among them. Zeke, however, remained calm. He told them not to worry, and pointed out Langus's eyes. Langus was completely focused. Blue light began to shine from his gaze as his opponent continued attacking relentlessly. Every strike was dodged with flawless precision. Frustration twisted the opponent's face as he activated the three-blade chaos, three-leaf dance. At that moment, Langus's eyes flared brighter. He activated the cloud and water spear technique. Using passing clouds, flowing water, he cleanly intercepted the attack, leaving his opponent stunned and unable to react. Without hesitation, Langus followed up, activating the technique again and unleashing flood drilling. His polearm drove forward with overwhelming force. The strike landed directly in the opponent's chest. The impact was decisive. The opponent collapsed unconscious. Instructor Mentric stepped in immediately, declaring the match over and announcing victory for the East Wing. Langus exhaled deeply, a weak smile forming on his face. Beside him, Zeke could no longer hide his satisfaction. He calmly stated that this was finally the moment when everything would begin to turn around.